Hidden in the far corners of the earth are mountains so surreal they feel like something out of a dream. Places where mist clings to ancient peaks, forests whisper with forgotten legends, and landscapes shimmer with colors and shapes that defy logic. In this journey, we explore some of the planet's most unreal mountain realms, untamed, sacred, and breathtakingly beautiful. These are not just natural wonders, they are living worlds where culture, mystery, and raw wilderness merge into something truly extraordinary. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. High in the undisturbed heart of Huen Province lies a vast green wilderness, a place where time seems to have slowed, where the breath of the earth rises each morning in gentle clouds of mist from deep gorges hidden beneath dense foliage. This is Mount Mang, or Mangshan, a spectacular, thickly forested expanse of wild nature that belongs not just to China's national park system, but to the ancient spirit of the land itself. Remote, heavily vegetated, and ecologically vibrant, Mangshan is a living arc of biodiversity. Its towering ridges and plunging ravines form a topography sculpted by eons of water, wind, and geologic time. The terrain here is not merely steep, it is primeval, carved with winding valleys and deep clefts where rivers flow in crystalline blue, secretive and unyielding to casual exploration. Mangshan is often referred to as the southern gate of central China due to its location on the border of Huen and Guangdong. But more than its geographic placement, it serves as a threshold between the human world and a world still ruled by untamed natural law. This mountain range covers nearly 200 square kilometers of temperate forest, one of the largest remaining subtropical evergreen broadleaf forests in all of China. Within these dense woods thrive countless species of plants and animals, many of them rare or endangered. The Chinese giant salamander, golden pheasant, serow, and leopard cat call this ecosystem home. And towering above the underbrush are ancient trees, some hundreds of years old, with canopies that block out the sun like vaulted ceilings in nature's cathedral. The seasons here change with drama. In spring, Mangshan bursts into bloom with wild rhododendrons and azaleas that coat the hillsides in pink and lavender hues, while the air becomes heavy with the scent of pine resin and mountain herbs. Summer thickens the forest with damp heat and heavy rainfall, feeding countless waterfalls and streams that echo with the sound of rushing water. Autumn is perhaps the most mesmerizing season, when the forests transform into a palette of copper, crimson, and gold, the deciduous trees igniting the slopes in fire-like color. And in winter, though snowfall is rare at lower elevations, frost climbs the upper ridges and mornings are veiled in icy silence. One of the most astonishing features of Mangshan is its gorges. They are not only steep and treacherous but host to unique microclimates, ecological bubbles that shelter species found nowhere else. The Black Gorge, for instance, is famed for its vertical walls and winding trails that descend into mist-draped depths, with wooden boardwalks clinging precariously to the rock face. Hikers entering these spaces often describe a sensation of stepping into another world, cool, damp, with the distant sound of dripping water and the call of unseen birds echoing across stone. This region is also home to a long history of herbal medicine and traditional healing. Mangshan's forests are rich in medicinal plants used in traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, such as wild ginseng, polygonatum, and angelica. Local healers still journey into the forest to collect these ingredients, practicing knowledge passed down through generations. The connection between people and the land here runs deep, not as conquerors, but as quiet partners in the preservation of an ancient rhythm of life. The cultural layer of Mount Mang is equally compelling. Though largely unpopulated due to its rugged terrain, the surrounding areas are dotted with small villages inhabited by ethnic groups such as the Yao and Hakka. These communities maintain a close spiritual and practical relationship with the mountain. Rituals to appease forest spirits, stories of animal guardians, and local legends of hidden spirits are embedded in the oral histories of these people. The reverence for Mangshan is not symbolic, it is lived and breathed, integrated into daily rituals and seasonal festivals. Adding to its mystique, Mangshan has long been considered a refuge, not just for plants and animals, but for people seeking escape from the noise and speed of modern civilization. Visitors today come to Mangshan National Forest Park not for amusement or convenience, but for the quiet majesty of raw nature. Its hiking trails are long and winding, its observation decks provide breathtaking views that seem to stretch into another age, and its waterfalls offer the constant reminder that water, stone, and time are the oldest architects. Among its most famed landmarks is the Mangshan Ridge itself, a dragon-backed stretch of sharp peaks that appear to rise and fall in rhythmic succession across the skyline. Standing atop these ridges at dawn or dusk, when the fog rolls in and the forest below disappears into a sea of cloud, one is overwhelmed not only by beauty but by the sensation of insignificance. Here, humanity is no longer the center of the story. The Earth is. Perhaps what makes Mount Mang feel so unreal is not just its physical features, but the fact that such a complete, untamed ecosystem still exists in a country as developed as modern China. With industrialization pressing on all sides and megacities rising at lightning speed, the unbroken tranquility of Mangshan feels like a holdover from another epoch, a breathing monument to deep time, and a silent promise that wildness, when left alone, can still flourish. Far to the west of Hune's central basin, where the land begins to shift and rise in striking formations that seem to defy the conventional logic of geology, lies a place of color, form, and geological wonder unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Mount Langshan, also known simply as Langshan, is not merely a mountain. It is a fantastical realm of crimson stone pillars, towering cliffs, winding canyons, and isolated peaks that seem to float like islands in a sea of green. It is here that the Danxia landforms, a unique type of red sandstone erosion, reach some of their most breathtaking expressions, sculpting Langshan into an alien-looking dreamscape that seems drawn from the canvas of imagination rather than shaped by wind, water, and time. Located in Xining County, on the southwestern edge of Hune Province, Mount Langshan is one of China's officially recognized UNESCO Global Geoparks, and with good reason. The area covers over 100 square kilometers of terrain that appears to have been painted by fire and sculpted by air. The mountains are composed primarily of red-colored sandstones and conglomerates laid down during the Cretaceous period, between 165 million years ago. Over millennia, these soft sedimentary rocks were lifted by tectonic forces and gradually carved by wind and rain into towering pillars, razor-edged ridges, natural bridges, gorges, caves, and cliffs that stand like sentinels in a land untouched by the hands of modernity. The Danxia formations at Langshan are unlike any other geological structure in China or indeed in the world. Though Danxia landforms occur in several regions of China, most notably in Guangdong, Fujian, and Jiangxi, Langshan is often considered one of the most vivid examples of this geological phenomenon. What sets Langshan apart is not only the sheer verticality of its cliffs but the sharpness of its lines, the surreal balance of its freestanding rock spires, and the brilliance of its hues. In the soft golden light of sunrise or the ruby-tinged dusk, the red rocks glow with a life of their own, the color shifting between vermilion, rust, and ochre as shadows stretch and shorten with the moving sun. Among its most famous features is the Qianzishan, or Heavenly King's Mountain, a group of colossal stone pillars that stand straight like organ pipes toward the sky. These formations inspire is almost spiritual, not merely because of their size but because of the seeming impossibility of their shapes. Another of Langshan's jewels is the so-called Sleeping Beauty Formation, a naturally eroded ridgeline that, from a distance, resembles the profile of a reclining woman. These formations are not simply geological oddities, they are integral to the local folklore and cultural identity of the region, embedded in stories and names that tie the natural with the mythological. One cannot speak of Langshan without mentioning the incredibly narrow gorge known as Fuyuan Gorge. This gorge, often only a meter wide in certain sections, winds its way through towering stone walls that rise dozens of meters above on either side. Walking through the gorge is a surreal experience. The red rock so close it feels as though the mountain is closing in, the light filtering in thin golden shafts from above, and the air growing cooler with each step. The gorge floor is often slick with water from underground springs, and vines cling to the stone as though seeking sanctuary in the stone's embrace. Echoes in the gorge bounce and repeat, as if the mountain itself is whispering. Another highlight is Bai's Hangxia, or Hundredjong Gorge, a dizzying cliffside walkway that clings to the side of a vertical precipice. Visitors inch along narrow stone paths carved directly into the face of the mountain, their hearts pounding with both fear and exhilaration as they look down into the yawning gorge below. From this height, the surrounding peaks unfold in all directions like the crests of a red ocean. Standing on these ancient rocks, one is reminded not only of Earth's geological processes but of time itself, the slow grinding force of wind and rain that, over millennia, reduced towering ranges to needles of stone. What makes Langshan truly otherworldly, however, is the way nature and light play together. Early morning fog often cloaks the valleys between peaks, creating a dreamscape of floating islands and disembodied cliffs. The red stone, veined with mineral strata and dotted with lichens, takes on a saturated, almost painterly quality when wet with mist. And in spring and autumn, the valleys burst into color as wildflowers bloom and forests shift to gold, bronze, and flame. Flora and fauna thrive in the crevices and ledges of Langshan. Though the cliffs appear barren from a distance, they are home to resilient species of mosses, orchids, and ferns that cling to the rock like living lace. Small birds nest in the cracks, and mountain goats scale impossibly steep slopes with ease. Below the cliffs, subtropical forests blanket the lower elevations, providing habitat for countless species of insects, amphibians, and small mammals. The biodiversity of the region is a key reason for its protected status. Langshan is not only visually extraordinary, but ecologically irreplaceable. Langshan is also steeped in spiritual and cultural significance. Temples and shrines are tucked into the cliffs, some so old they seem to have grown from the stone itself. The people of Xining County have long considered the mountain sacred. Legends tell of immortals who once walked its ridges and gods who lived in the peaks. Taoist monks once made pilgrimage to the caves of Langshan to meditate in solitude, seeking enlightenment in the silence between stone and sky. Today, local festivals are still held to honor mountain spirits, blending Han Chinese traditions with older animistic beliefs. Despite its grandeur, Langshan remains relatively uncrowded compared to other UNESCO sites in China. Partly this is due to its location, far from the major urban centers, and partly due to its challenging terrain. But for those who do make the journey, the reward is immense, not just in terms of aesthetic wonder, but in the experience of being completely dwarfed by a landscape that seems older than memory, and possibly older than myth. In recent years, careful efforts have been made to preserve Langshan's fragile beauty. Boardwalks and viewing platforms have been constructed to minimize the impact of tourism, while local authorities enforce strict conservation guidelines. Drone photography and virtual tourism are also helping to promote the region without overburdening its environment. Educational signage explains the unique geological processes that created the Danxia formations, giving visitors a deeper appreciation for the timescale involved, the millions of years it took to carve such otherworldly shapes from sediment and sand. But no amount of scientific explanation can fully convey what it feels like to walk through Langshan. There is something elemental here, a fusion of fire and water, time and silence, color and stone, that bypasses the intellect and goes straight to the soul. In Langshan, the Earth's slow labor becomes a visible narrative, and the land itself speaks through the curve of a cliff, the fall of a shadow, or the outline of a peak mirrored perfectly in a still pool of rainwater. Mount Langshan is not simply a geological formation, not merely a tourist destination, and certainly not just another park. It is a landscape that feels lifted from another world, a place where nature, left to her own devices for eons, has written poetry in stone. And when one stands at the edge of a red cliff, wind in the ears and the smell of earth in the air, the noise of the world seems to fall away, leaving only the whisper of ancient rivers and the silent watch of the mountains. Rising above the sprawling pine forests of northern Hebei, not far from the provincial border with Beijing, Mount Shuang, or Shuangfeng Mountain, is a place where geometry and nature meet in a near-perfect mirror. Its very name, Shuangfeng, translates to twin peaks, a literal reference to the two nearly symmetrical summits that pierce the sky side by side like a gateway to the heavens. These twin peaks, though not the tallest in the region, possess a quiet grandeur that has captivated generations of travelers, artists, and seekers. Especially in autumn, when the pine forests below take on rich tapestries of ochre, gold, and crimson, Mount Shuang becomes a surreal canvas of symmetry and serenity. Unlike the sheer red cliffs of Danxia or the snowy crags of Tibetan giants, Mount Shuang's appeal is more understated, almost lyrical in its proportions. Its twin summits rise in harmony, like siblings formed from the same geological thought, and their silhouettes at dusk or dawn form a profile so balanced that ancient poets once claimed they were the stone embodiment of yin and yang. From many angles, the peaks appear to lean toward each other, as though in silent conversation above the vast forest canopy. The mountain is part of the larger Yangshan Range, a significant chain of mountains that stretches across northern China and forms a natural boundary between the North China Plain and the Mongolian Plateau. Yangshan itself is a geologic relic of great antiquity, having formed during the Mesozoic era. Shuangfeng is a product of those ancient tectonic collisions, uplifted and weathered over millions of years, but it stands out from its neighbors because of the near-equal height and distinctive sharpness of its twin summits. one slightly broader and one more narrow and pointed. Mount Shuang rises to a modest elevation of just over 1,300 meters, but what it lacks in raw altitude, it compensates for in visual drama. Dense pine forests stretch across its lower slopes in deep green carpets, broken occasionally by open meadows or veins of exposed granite. As the mountain ascends, the trees thin, giving way to scrub and wind-carved rock outcrops. And then, quite suddenly, the landscape converges into its two stony spires, jagged and upright, like twin fingers pointing skyward. In autumn, Mount Shuang transforms into something transcendent. The pines remain evergreen, stoic, and unchanging, but interspersed throughout the forest are deciduous trees, maples, birches, and Chinese smoke trees, whose foliage ignites in late October with a fiery brilliance. From a distance, the mountain seems to wear a mantle of flame. The color spills down its flanks in cascading waves of scarlet, amber, and gold, turning every trail, ridge, and valley into an impressionist painting rendered in living pigment. During this season, photographers and painters flock to Shuangfeng, hoping to capture a moment that often feels too fleeting to fully grasp. A single day's light casting the leaves into molten fire before the inevitable browning and fall. Trails wind through this forest like lifelines, many of them ancient and still marked with weathered stones from older dynastic eras. There are temples hidden among the groves, some ruined, others still active, tended by quiet monks who carry out rituals at dawn while the mountain is still wrapped in fog. The twin peaks themselves can be climbed, though the ascent grows steeper and more demanding near the top, with stone steps and metal chains bolted into the rock face to assist. The final stretch involves a narrow ridge path, with panoramic views opening up on both sides, a visual feast of layered mountains, mist-draped valleys, and distant cityscapes on clear days. At the summit of the eastern peak, there is a simple stone pavilion. Its design is minimalist, a square roof, for posts, and open sides, but it is perfectly positioned to catch both sunrise and moonrise. Those who hike up before dawn are rewarded with a view unlike any other, a horizon that shifts from black to indigo, from rose to gold, as the sun crawls into the sky behind a curtain of slowly retreating stars. The western peak, slightly higher and less visited, offers a different kind of awe. From its summit, the setting sun bleeds across the ridgelines in washes of orange and blue, while the twin shadows of the peaks stretch long across the forested valley. Legends surround Mount Shuang like morning mist. One popular tale speaks of two warrior brothers who defended the local villagers against marauding bandits during a chaotic period in China's past. When they died in battle, the gods, moved by their loyalty and brotherhood, turned them into mountains so they could stand watch over the people forever. Another, more spiritual legend, speaks of the mountain as a place where the energies of yin and yang meet in harmony, and couples often hike it together in the belief that the peaks will bless their union with balance and endurance. Despite its relative proximity to Beijing and other urban centers, Mount Shuang retains an untouched, almost forgotten quality. Part of this is due to its somewhat remote trailheads, many of which can only be accessed via winding roads that disappear into pine-shadowed valleys. But it is also a result of deliberate conservation. Local authorities and ecological groups have made a concerted effort to preserve the mountain's natural beauty and limit overdevelopment. Facilities are modest, a few small inns, tea houses, and family-run guest homes, and even in peak season, the mountain rarely feels crowded. It's a sanctuary, not a spectacle. The surrounding villages embrace a slow, seasonal rhythm tied to the mountain. In spring, villagers forage for wild mushrooms and herbs in the lower woods. In summer, they harvest fruit from the terraced orchards that dot the foothills. Autumn brings a flurry of activity, not only from the tourists but from locals who hold festivals to thank the mountain for its protection and bounty. Fires are lit, red paper lanterns sway between pine trunks, and traditional music echoes through the valleys. Winter, though stark and often snow-covered, is a time of reflection. The peaks stand white and still, and the air takes on a purity that cleanses both lungs and soul. But even in winter's silence, Mount Shuang is never lifeless. Its cliffs and forests house rare species of birds and small mammals that endure the cold in nests, burrows, and tree hollows. Eagles circle its peaks. Owls haunt its hollows while deer trace quiet paths through the snow-dusted underbrush. And always, the pines remain, tall, fragrant, green, guardians of an ecosystem and a mountain that asks only for silence, reverence, and time. To stand before Mount Shuang is to encounter a geometry of stillness. Its twin peaks are not just physical landmarks but metaphors, for balance, for companionship, for permanence in a world that so often shifts and fades. They rise together, face the seasons together, weather storms together, and they invite all who walk beneath them to do the same. To seek balance, to look inward, and to find, in the mirrored summits above, something deeply human and profoundly eternal. Rising from the heart of central China like a stone scripture written by nature's hand, Mount Tianhua, Tianhuashan, is one of Henan Province's most spiritually and aesthetically resonant landscapes. Though not as globally recognized as China's 5 sacred mountains or its UNESCO-listed peaks, Tianhuashan holds an enchantment that feels profoundly timeless. It is a Daoist mountain in the deepest, truest sense, not merely because temples cling to its ridges or sages once meditated in its caves, but because its every element seems to breathe with the Tao itself. From wind-polished cliffs to wild blossoms that burst forth in springtime silence, this mountain whispers of balance, stillness, and the beauty of quiet transformation. Tianhuashan literally means heavenly flower mountain, and even the name evokes a delicate duality, the majesty of heaven and the fragility of a blossom, coexisting in one place. Located in southwestern Henan, near the border with Hubei, it forms part of the Greater Funyo mountain range. The region is renowned for its varied terrain, rolling hills, abrupt cliffs, deeply carved river valleys, and for the centuries-old association with Daoist philosophy and nature worship. Yet Tianhuashan itself stands apart, a mountain whose profile is neither harsh nor towering, but graceful, intimate, and harmoniously formed. The heart of Tianhuashan's allure lies in its natural structure. The mountain is composed of rugged stone ridges that lift and undulate like dragon spines across a forested canvas. These ridges frequently narrow into knife-edged paths, with sheer drops on either side and views that sweep across misty valleys, shadowed hollows, and distant farms where rice paddies glisten like scales of jade. The rock here is pale grey granite, weathered into hauntingly smooth shapes, arches, shelves, rounded platforms, that bear a curious resemblance to flowing water despite their hardness. In some places, the cliffs rise straight from the forest like petrified waves, towering over the land with quiet poise. Every season on Tianhuashan carries its own magic, but none more so than spring. As the chill of winter retreats and the mountain begins to thaw, its slopes awaken in color. Plum blossoms are the first to appear, delicate pink and white petals that cluster around old, gnarled trees rooted in cracks along the rock. Soon after, apricot and cherry blossoms follow, carpeting whole hillsides with soft, ephemeral beauty. Wild azaleas emerge next, their hues shifting from lavender to deep scarlet, especially at mid-elevations where sunlight trickles through newly formed leaf canopies. This riot of blooming transforms Tianhuashan into something closer to a dream or an ancient painting come to life. These blossoms are not only visual marvels, they are also deeply symbolic within the Daoist tradition. Plum blossoms, in particular, represent perseverance and renewal, a tenacity to bloom despite the cold. On Tianhuashan, it's said that every flower blooms in accordance with the qi of the mountain, following invisible pulses of energy that rise and fall with the terrain. Some pilgrims come not just to admire the flowers but to sit beneath them and meditate, believing that the scent alone can harmonize the spirit with the Tao. Indeed, spiritual pursuit is woven into the very fabric of Tianhuashan. Small Daoist temples, some ancient and weather-beaten, others lovingly maintained, are tucked into the folds of the mountain. Their red-tiled roofs peek from behind flowering trees, while stone paths, sometimes no wider than a goat track, wind their way from shrine to shrine. One of the most revered is the Huaxian Temple, said to date back to the Ming dynasty and dedicated to a legendary female immortal who once achieved enlightenment beneath a plum tree near the summit. Devotees still climb to this temple to light incense and leave offerings, believing the mountain listens more keenly in spring when the blossoms bloom. Another sacred site is the Yuxian Cave, a shallow but atmospheric grotto halfway up the southern slope, where a Daoist hermit once meditated for 30 years, living only on mountain spring water and foraged herbs. The entrance is adorned with weathered carvings, dragons, clouds, and ancient calligraphy etched directly into the stone. Local legend holds that if one sits in complete stillness within the cave for an hour, the mountain may reveal its flower soul, a personal vision or insight sent to those who truly seek harmony. The soundscape of Tianhuashan is just as enchanting as its vistas. Unlike the bustling sacred peaks of China where tourist noise often drowns nature's voice, Tianhuashan remains comparatively quiet. Birds such as orioles, thrushes, and magpies call out from unseen perches. Bees hum in the groves of blossoming trees, and the occasional rustle of leaves or rush of wind down a valley serves as a reminder of the mountain's living, breathing essence. Streams and waterfalls lace the forested slopes, fed by the mountain's hidden springs and snow melt. Their waters are cold, clear, and often imbued with minerals from the surrounding rock, long believed by locals to carry curative properties. Bathing one's hands in these streams is a common ritual, meant to cleanse not only the body but also lingering stress and sorrow. Autumn offers a different palette. As temperatures drop, the mountain is cloaked in a shifting tapestry of red maple, amber ginkgo, and golden larches. The Daoist belief in the cyclical nature of life, of returning, shedding, and rebirth, feels particularly potent during this time. The same trees that bloomed in joy just months earlier now release their leaves without resistance, blanketing temple courtyards and cliffside paths in a carpet of fire and bronze. Winter, meanwhile, is stark and solemn. Snow dusts the peaks and settles in the crevices of carved stone lions and weathered stupas. The blossoms vanish, the streams quiet, and the temples appear almost abandoned. Yet those who brave the cold say Tianhuashan is never more alive than in its stillness. Meditation in this silence feels deeper, prayers rise with greater clarity, and even footsteps take on a ritual quality. Daoist monks often say winter is the mountain's true face, unadorned, contemplative, and vast. Beyond its spiritual and aesthetic gifts, Tianhuashan also functions as a precious ecological preserve. Its elevation gradient supports a surprising diversity of plant life, from moss-draped valleys filled with ferns and cycads to higher slopes where medicinal herbs grow in hidden pockets. Rare bird species have been spotted in its woodlands, and the occasional sighting of wild boar or serow has been reported near its more remote ridges. Conservation efforts in the last decade have focused on sustainable tourism, encouraging low-impact footpaths, educational signage about flora and fauna, and limits on vehicle access to sensitive zones. Local communities surrounding the mountain maintain a close, respectful relationship with it. Villagers in the nearby hamlets often serve as informal guides, tea makers, and storytellers. Their knowledge, passed down orally, is not written in books or inscribed on temple walls, but it carries an intimate understanding of Tianhuashan's moods, its winds, its dangers, and its sacred silences. During key seasonal festivals, such as Qingming and Mid-Autumn, processions of locals climb the mountain to offer thanks, not just to the deities, but to the land itself. Tianhuashan, unlike many mountains that oar through scale or peril, humbles through harmony. Its cliffs do not intimidate, they cradle. Its blossoms do not dazzle, they soften. Its silence is not empty, it is full of meaning. The entire mountain, in its form, rhythm, and breath, seems to embody the essence of Tao, effortless balance, the union of opposites, the quiet flow of time, the beauty of becoming without striving. To ascend Tianhuashan is not simply to climb a mountain, but to enter a moving dialogue between earth and sky, stone and blossom, self and world. It is a place where one does not conquer, but communes, where every step, if taken with mindfulness, draws the traveler closer not just to the summit, but to a deeper understanding of the self in relation to all things. High atop the undulating ridges of northwestern Guizhou, where clouds drift like idle thoughts across a vast and elevated horizon, lies Mount Jukaping, a highland wonderland of ethereal color and delicate life. Known throughout China for one singular seasonal phenomenon, this mountain is not defined by its height, its cliffs, or its sacred temples, but by its bloom. Every summer, Jukaping becomes a sea of swaying blossoms, a living quilt of wild lilies that stretches across the mountain's crown in every direction, as though the sky itself had fallen to earth in soft, fragrant waves. It is one of the most surreal spectacles in China's botanical landscape, a fleeting and almost otherworldly moment when the earth becomes painter and performer, blooming not for survival, but seemingly for the sheer joy of it. Located in Bijia Prefecture, in the Wuming mountain region of Guizhou province, Jukaping is a high plateau mountain reaching around 2,900 meters above sea level, making it one of the tallest points in the entire region. The name Jukaping roughly translates to liquor grass flat or grassland of nine fortunes, a name derived from the ancient belief that the grasses here were so lush and fragrant that they could ferment on their own and produce a sweet, wine-like aroma under the summer sun. But today, it is not the grasses that draw attention, it is the lilies, especially the rare and visually striking Lilium brownii var. Viridulum, also known as the Chinese green lily. In July and August, as the monsoon rains retreat and the mists part over the plateau, the summit of Jukaping explodes into life. Hundreds of millions of lilies emerge from the soil like waking stars, their delicate petals opening in full coordination with the rising of the summer sun. The scene is dazzling beyond words. Cream-white blossoms with faint green veins and golden hearts cluster tightly together, their stalks standing tall amid waves of windblown grasses. As the wind moves, the flowers ripple in synchrony, creating a visual effect akin to watching the surface of a lake dance beneath moonlight. These are not domesticated flowers but wild, hardy lilies that have evolved to thrive in Jukaping's high-altitude microclimate. The sheer scale of the bloom is difficult to comprehend. Jukaping's flower fields stretch for more than 10 square kilometers, an ocean of blossoms that covers the mountain's summit like a sacred veil. Visitors who arrive during peak season often describe the sensation of stepping into a dream. There are no fences or rows to contain the growth. The lilies bloom where they will, spilling over ridges, clustering along narrow paths, and sprouting even from the cracks in ancient stone. The air is saturated with fragrance, soft, sweet, slightly spicy. Bees and butterflies hum through the fields in hypnotic patterns, drawn by the promise of nectar in a landscape where the sky seems close enough to touch. Though the summer bloom is Jukaping's most iconic trait, the mountain is never barren. In spring, its meadows are dotted with wild rhododendrons, gentians, and violets. Autumn brings alpine grasses that turn gold and copper in the sun, and in winter, snow sometimes dusts the lily's dormant roots while frost crystals form along the ridgelines. This biodiversity has earned Jukaping recognition not just as a scenic destination, but as an ecological treasure. The mountain hosts dozens of alpine and subalpine plant species, many of which are endemic to Guizhou's limestone plateaus. Its high altitude and relative isolation have preserved a unique ecosystem where flowering plants, rare herbs, and microfauna exist in delicate harmony. Despite its ecological richness, Jukaping is remarkably accessible, at least in a relative sense. Paved roads and winding trails lead from nearby towns up to the main viewing areas near the summit. And yet, despite its popularity in summer, the mountain retains a sense of seclusion and scale. The flower fields are so vast, and the terrain so gentle, that even crowds seem to vanish into the landscape. One can easily walk for hours along ridges and never see another person, only the sound of one's footsteps brushing through the petals and the rhythmic whistle of wind moving between slopes. Locals have long revered Jukaping not just for its beauty but for its nourishment, both literal and spiritual. The mountain has long been associated with fertility, longevity, and abundance. In ancient times, ethnic Yi and Miao communities would perform seasonal rituals at the summit, offering prayers and dances amid the blooming lilies. Some still do. During the blooming season today, festivals are held in nearby villages, where traditional songs and dances celebrate not only the mountain's bounty but its enduring spirit. Women wear embroidered costumes with floral motifs, men beat drums that echo like thunder against the hills, and families climb together to witness the bloom, some kneeling among the lilies to give thanks or make quiet wishes. Folklore, too, is rich around Jukaping. One beloved legend tells of a young woman named Ling Hua, who lived in a mountain village long ago. She fell in love with a traveler from afar, but her family forbade the union. Distraught, she climbed the mountain alone, where she wept and sang her sorrows to the stars. It's said that her tears turned into lilies, pure, resilient, and eternal. Each summer, when the flowers bloom, villagers say it is Ling Hua singing again, her voice now carried by the wind through the petals. Though spiritualism still lingers in whispers, the mountain today is also a place of scientific interest. Botanists and ecologists regularly visit Jukaping to study its plant populations, especially the wild lily varieties. There are efforts underway to ensure the lilies are protected from overharvesting and that tourism is carefully managed. Boardwalks have been constructed in some areas to prevent trampling, and drone flights are restricted during bloom season to avoid disturbing pollinators and nesting birds. These measures aim to strike a balance, allowing people to witness the mountain's glory without erasing the conditions that created it. As the day wanes on Jukaping, the sunlight changes the tone of the entire mountain. The lilies, which glowed white gold under the noon sun, now blush faintly pink in the evening light. Shadows stretch across the plateau, and the wind grows cooler. From the summit, the view extends in every direction, layered mountain ranges in the distance, misty valleys below, and the last light of the day caught on a billion petals. It is a moment that defies photography or speech. To stand among those blooms as the mountain exhales the last breath of daylight is to feel something deeper than awe. It is to remember that life is brief, beauty is fleeting, and both are worth celebrating. Mount Ju-caping is not a place of danger or conquest. It does not challenge the human body like Everest or seduce with sacred status like Tai Shan. Instead, it teaches by example. It reminds visitors that gentleness can be powerful, that fragility can endure, and that sometimes, the most unreal places are not those that tower highest, but those that bloom quietly beneath an open sky, asking nothing and offering everything. Southwest China is a land where the earth seems to wear its bones on the outside, where the land doesn't roll so much as it ruptures and folds like a slumbering dragon caught in the motion of waking. In the heart of this tectonic tapestry lies the Wuming Mountains. Mount Wuming, a range so sculpted, fractured, and alive with elemental force that it scarcely seems real. Unlike solitary peaks that soar in singular majesty, the Wuming Range is a kingdom of stone and shadow, gorges and ridges, carved not by mere erosion but by the intimate, chaotic dance of geology and time. Here, in the highlands of western Guizhou, the terrain is not just terrain. It is myth made manifest, folded limestone, shattered cliffs, plunging valleys, and the echo of rivers that have known no master but gravity and time. Mount Wuming is not a singular peak but a vast range, part of the greater Yunnan Guizhou Plateau, stretching across Bijie and winding in northwestern Guizhou and into the borderlands of Yunnan and Sichuan. It forms one of the most ecologically and geologically diverse mountain systems in China, though it remains relatively obscure on the international stage. But among those who study karst formations, endemic plant species, and China's complex hydrology, the Wuming Mountains are a natural cathedral, immense, mystifying, and profoundly significant. What defines this range is its chaos, a chaos born not of disorder, but of complexity. The mountains are largely composed of limestone, dolomite, and other soluble rocks formed during the Paleozoic era and subsequently warped by eons of tectonic uplift. The result is a landscape of extremes, jagged ridgelines that zigzag like broken swords, deep, narrow gorges that slice through the earth as if by celestial blade, and valleys so deep and remote they remain untouched by modern development. These gorges, known as changkengs or heavenly pits, are not mere fissures but entire ecosystems hidden between vertical walls, microcosms of biodiversity, weather, and sound. The karst topography of Wuming is among the finest and most dramatic in Asia. Here, dissolution has created natural stone arches, spires, towers, and sinkholes that appear almost too surreal to be natural. Caves lace the interior of the mountains like a network of secret veins. Some stretch for kilometers underground, their chambers adorned with stalactites that drip like frozen chandeliers, others hiding ancient underground rivers that have carved their paths in complete darkness. The Qixing cave system, one of the most notable in the range, is still only partially explored, its labyrinthine tunnels rich with mineral deposits and underground lakes that mirror the stone ceilings like liquid glass. From the ground, the Wuming Range can feel endless, an unfolding symphony of cliff and chasm, with each peak revealing a new pattern of light and stone. Forests cling to the slopes, anchored between scree and crag, while highland meadows burst into bloom each spring with wildflowers, mosses, and hardy shrubs. In summer, mists roll through the valleys like restless spirits, softening the harsh silhouettes of the cliffs and filling the ravines with a dreamlike stillness. When viewed from above, either from drone footage or the rare sky platforms perched along narrow escarpments, the land resembles a vast, crumpled scroll, as if the gods once tried to smooth the earth and then abandoned the task midway. Ecologically, Mount Wuming is a biodiversity hotspot. The extreme changes in elevation and microclimate have made it a refuge for hundreds of rare species. The forests are home to black bears, masked civets, golden pheasants, and clouded leopards. Amphibians and insects thrive in the shaded grottos of the gorges, while orchids and ferns cloak the forest floor like a secret language of leaves. More than 1,500 plant species have been catalogued in the region, many of them endemic or threatened, and conservation biologists regard Wuming as a crucial habitat corridor for southwestern China. But even amid all its scientific and scenic grandeur, Wuming remains deeply human. Indigenous Yi, Miao, and Buyei communities have lived in and around these mountains for centuries, maintaining agricultural terraces on impossibly steep slopes, cultivating maize, sorghum, and medicinal herbs, and practicing animist traditions rooted in reverence for the land. To them, the mountains are not obstacles but ancestors, beings of great age and power whose moods can be read in the movement of the clouds, the call of the birds, and the direction of river flow. Many villages hold seasonal ceremonies to honor mountain spirits, and ancient stone altars can still be found deep in the woods, their surfaces worn smooth by generations of offerings. Travelers to Wuming often begin in Bijie, the regional hub, before venturing into the wilder, more remote arms of the range. The route is not easy. Winding roads climb and descend with vertigo-inducing switchbacks, and trails are often narrow and muddy, especially during the monsoon months. But for those who persist, the rewards are staggering. One such marvel is the Kauhai Nature Reserve, nestled in the upper elevations of the Wuming Plateau. This high-altitude wetland, its name meaning sea of grass, spreads across the plateau like a mirror to the sky. It is home to the endangered black-necked crane and serves as a vital overwintering site for dozens of migratory birds. In winter, the lake often ices over, and mist curls from the water's surface like breath from the lungs of the earth. Not far from Kauhai is the dramatic Judongshan, or Nine Cave Heavens, a series of caves stacked like divine dwellings within the sheer cliff of a Wuming gorge. Each cave leads to another, some by ladders, others by natural tunnels or carved steps. Legend says each chamber represents a different virtue or realm of enlightenment. To ascend all 9 is to metaphorically climb towards spiritual clarity. Many pilgrims attempt the ascent during local festivals, lighting incense and chanting as they pass through stone corridors lit only by slits of daylight and flickering flames. Though modernity is gradually brushing against Wuming's edges, cell towers sprouting on ridgelines, eco-lodges appearing near scenic zones, the core of the range remains remote and mysterious. Conservation efforts are active but cautious, with provincial and national authorities balancing tourism, ecological protection, and the livelihoods of indigenous people. There is growing recognition that Wuming's greatest value lies not in its exploitation, but in its preservation, not just as a natural wonder, but as a living testament to the Earth's ancient artistry. As the sun sets in Wuming, light plays tricks on the stone. The limestone cliffs glow amber and peach, casting long shadows into the valleys below. Rivers, often unseen from the heights, begin to shimmer, reflecting the fire-colored sky. And the wind that curls through the ravines carries not just the scent of damp earth and moss, but the silence of a place that has never needed human words to justify its beauty. In the half-light, the jagged silhouettes of the mountains resemble waves frozen in mid-crash, as if the land itself once surged skyward and decided to remain that way. Mount Wuming is not a mountain to be visited, it is a mountain to be entered, like a poem written in rock, a mystery that does not unravel but deepens. Its gorges are not just cuts in the earth but invitations to descend, to listen, to stand still and let the enormity of stone and silence settle into your bones. In this place where everything is both fractured and whole, real and unreal, ancient and ever-changing, one cannot help but feel the weight of time, and the fleeting, fragile wonder of being alive within it. Far from the known circuits of pilgrimage and distant from the well-mapped tourist routes of the Tibetan Plateau, there rises a peak so remote, so still, and so deeply steeped in reverence that even many lifelong Tibetans have only seen it from a distance. This is Mount Kamari, also known as Kamari Snow Mountain, an isolated giant of snow and silence that watches over the wild eastern reaches of Tibet. Cradled in solitude and bound in ancient snow for most of the year, Kamari is not merely a geographic point of elevation, but a place of breathless spiritual weight. To local Tibetans, it is not just a mountain. It is a protector, a guardian spirit, an embodiment of the divine within the raw flesh of the earth itself. Mount Kamari lies deep in the heart of the Chamdo region of the Tibet Autonomous Region, nestled among a tangle of lesser-known sub-ranges of the Transhimalaya. This area, rarely visited by outsiders due to its remoteness and harsh climate, is a place where the land folds into itself with fierce elegance. Steep valleys carved by ancient glacier, ridgelines lashed by howling winds, and highland pastures so wide and unbroken they seem to float under the sky rather than exist upon the ground. The mountain itself is a pyramidal massif of dazzling white, its snowfields and glacial ridges gleaming even under the weakest sun. There is an unmistakable symmetry to its silhouette, a sacred geometry in stone and ice that immediately evokes awe. Estimates place Mount Kamari's elevation above 6,000 meters, over 19,600 feet, though exact measurements vary due to the lack of comprehensive surveys. It is not the highest peak in Tibet, not compared to the giants like Namcha Bawa or Mount Kailash, but height alone has never been the metric by which mountains earn their sacredness in Tibetan cosmology. What makes Kamari holy is its presence, the way it dominates its surroundings with regal stillness, the way clouds seem to circle it as if in meditation, and the way its slopes remain untouched, unmarred by roads, cables, or commercial infrastructure. It is, in the most literal sense, unspoiled. To the local Tibetan people, mostly of the Kampa and Loba ethnic groups, Mount Kamari is revered as a Yul Ha, or territorial deity. In Tibetan belief, every mountain has a soul, and some are so powerful, so pure in their spiritual force, that they are seen as the very incarnation of divine beings. Kamari, they say, is the guardian of this land, a celestial warrior that stands between the people and misfortune. Offerings are made to it regularly, not only at its base but also from a distance. Villagers light juniper incense on high ridges, toss lungta, prayer flags, into the wind, and offer white katas, ceremonial scarves, to rock cairns aligned with the mountain's face. It is believed that those who gaze upon Kamari with a pure heart will be blessed with long life, clarity of mind, and spiritual awakening. Pilgrimage around Mount Kamari is a deeply sacred act, though few complete it. The Kora, a ritual circumambulation of a holy site, is traditionally undertaken by walking the full circuit around the mountain, often a journey of several days across treacherous, pathless terrain. The outer Kora is rarely attempted, not just because of the physical demands, but because many believe that one must be spiritually prepared, free of malicious thoughts, cleansed of ego, and guided by devotion, to safely undertake such a path. Those who do attempt it often carry no gear but the most basic provisions and rely on the mountain itself to provide guidance and protection. The terrain surrounding Mount Kamari is staggeringly harsh and beautiful. Ice-fed rivers cut through narrow valleys where nomadic yak herders pitch their tents in summer. These valleys are green for only a short time, covered in wild alpine flowers, blues, yellows, and purples that carpet the grasslands like spilled pigment. In winter, the land hardens. Snow covers every visible surface, and temperatures plunge well below freezing. Blizzards can come without warning, erasing the world in white. Yet, in the few months of summer, the land opens, and the true contrast of Kamari's surroundings comes into focus. Snow-capped serenity towering over a blooming, humming basin of life. From a geological perspective, Kamari is part of a complex faulted zone where tectonic plates have long collided, lifted, and fractured the crust into soaring peaks. The glacier that cling to Kamari's flanks are ancient and slowly receding, their meltwaters giving rise to pristine streams that feed the lower valleys. There are small lakes nearby, many of them regarded as sacred in their own right, reflecting the mountain like celestial mirrors and known locally as sky eyes. These lakes are often ringed by white stones, each placed by hand by pilgrims and shepherds who offer prayers for health, peace, or the well-being of their herds. Wildlife in this part of Tibet is elusive but awe-inspiring. Snow leopards, though rarely seen, roam the upper reaches. Blue sheep and Tibetan argali navigate the cliffs with astonishing agility, while Himalayan griffons and golden eagles wheel overhead in slow, patient circles. In the lower grasslands, marmots scurry across the rocks, and Tibetan foxes move like ghosts through the morning mist. The ecosystems here are fragile, sustained by the balance of altitude, temperature, and human respect. Unlike more frequented regions of the plateau, there is very little overgrazing, and hunting is often forbidden in areas considered under Kamari's protection. Perhaps one of the most remarkable qualities of Mount Kamari is the way it resists being turned into a commodity. In a world where even sacred sites are increasingly turned into destinations with entry tickets and guided tours, Kamari remains fiercely outside the sphere of development. There are no signs pointing the way to its base, no viewing platforms or cable cars, no tourist centers or souvenir stalls. This is partly due to its remote location, but also because the local communities, with the support of regional monks and spiritual leaders, have maintained a strong commitment to protecting the mountain from intrusion. They believe that commercialization would offend the mountain spirit, unbalance the land, and bring misfortune. Even photography here is taken with discretion. Many pilgrims refuse to point their lenses directly at the summit out of respect, believing that to capture the mountain without reverence is to steal a piece of its soul. Those who do photograph Kamari often do so from afar, allowing its presence to dominate the frame rather than reduce it to an object. And perhaps this is fitting. For Mount Kamari is not meant to be possessed or consumed. It is meant to be honored, witnessed, and remembered. In the stillness of a Tibetan dawn, when the stars fade and the first rays of sunlight touch the eastern slope of Kamari, the mountain becomes more than stone and snow. Its white summit glows with a gentle fire, its shadow stretches like a protective hand across the valley, and for a moment, all things seem to pause in reverence. It is in this moment that the true essence of Kamari reveals itself, not just as a mountain, but as a presence. A spirit of snow and silence, ancient and aware, cradled by the wind and held aloft by devotion. Mount Kamari does not call to climbers. It does not ask for conquest or admiration. It asks only to be seen with humility. To come near is to approach a sacred mirror, one that reflects not your image, but your intent. And if you come with reverence, with stillness, with the patience to listen to what cannot be spoken, you may hear the whisper of the mountain, that all things rise, fall, return, and rise again, and that in this endless, sacred motion, we are not separate from the mountain, but part of its breath. High in the ethereal eastern frontier of the Tibetan Plateau, tucked deep within the folds of one of the most visually spellbinding and geologically mysterious regions of Asia, lies a mountain known only to those who speak of it in reverent tones, Mount Juoxiongla. In the local tongue, Juoxiongla loosely translates to the place where the snow-capped mountain speaks, and to look upon it is to understand that mountains, though silent, can indeed speak in the language of awe. Remote even by Tibetan standards and virtually unknown to mass tourism, Juoxiongla is not a place one stumbles upon. It is a destination that reveals itself only to those willing to traverse the winding river valleys and mist-laced forests of the greater Ningxi region, a place as otherworldly as it is sacred. Situated near Ningxi, in southeastern Tibet, Mount Juoxiongla rises as a glacial titan above an untouched alpine basin, hemmed in by primeval coniferous forests, iridescent glacial lakes, and narrow passes that feel as though they lead directly into the heart of a forgotten paradise. This area, part of the famed Eastern Himalayas or Trans-Himalaya, is often referred to by Tibetan locals as the Jiangnan of Tibet, a poetic reference to its unusually lush and wet highland climate, which stands in stark contrast to the arid high deserts and stark wind-carved plains typical of the Tibetan Plateau. Here, mountains do not just dominate the landscape, they nurture it, capturing clouds in their arms, wringing them into rivulets that birth verdant valleys and feed crystalline lakes. Mount Juoxiongla is cloaked in snow for much of the year, its upper reaches crowned with year-round glacier that gleam with an almost translucent brilliance under the alpine sun. Though its exact elevation is not formally recorded in mainstream maps, owing to its remoteness and lack of significant human intervention, it is believed to exceed 5,500 meters, approximately 18,000 feet, placing it among the major high-altitude peaks of the Ningxi region. Its shape is rugged yet graceful, sharp ridgelines, cornice summits, and sweeping glacial valleys that fall away into forests below. But its most remarkable feature is not its height, nor its sculpted snowfields, it is the lakes. Scattered like sapphires at the foot of the mountain are a series of glacial lakes so vividly turquoise, so impossibly clear, that they seem not of this world. These lakes, known collectively by locals as the Sky Mirror Lakes or Namjong Tso, owe their vibrant color to the high mineral content of the glacial meltwater, the depth and purity of the water itself, and the fine suspended rock flour that refracts the sky's blueness into something almost electric. Surrounded by dense mossy forests, the lakes reflect not only the mountain above, but also the slow-moving clouds, the circling eagles, and, when the wind dies, the utter silence of this forgotten world. Each lake has its own personality, its own hue, its own lore. The largest, often called Mother's Mirror, is nestled in a wide, bowl-like depression, encircled by high ridges covered in rhododendron and juniper. Locals believe it is the eye of a goddess, a being who once descended from the heavens to tend the wounded land and then became part of it, weeping until a lake formed. Further upslope, hidden behind a thin wall of glacier-carved rock, is the Blue Eye, a smaller lake so deep and dark in tone that it seems to glow from within. Few dare approach it directly. According to local shepherds and monks, dreams brought back from its shores are not mere dreams, but visions. The area around Juoxiongla remains largely roadless. Access requires multiple days of hiking through forested valleys, across narrow suspension bridges, and up unmarked alpine trails used only by yak herders and spiritual pilgrims. There are no signs, no buildings, no artificial lights. The few who make the journey are guided either by local memory, handwritten maps, or an understanding of the land passed down through generations. Some of the passes are treacherous, particularly in early spring and late autumn, when snow and sudden fog can obscure visibility and erase even the faintest trail. Yet for those who persist, the moment of arrival, emerging from the forest to see the peak rising above the turquoise lakes, is like entering the pages of a story that has never been written. The spiritual significance of Mount Juoxiongla is deep and layered. Though not widely known in formal Tibetan Buddhist canon like Mount Kailash, it holds intense sacred value to local Bon and Nyingma practitioners. The Bon tradition, which predates Buddhism in Tibet, holds that the mountain is home to a powerful elemental deity, a guardian of water and forest whose favor must be earned through offerings and respectful passage. Small stone cairns and prayer flags can be found at strategic points along the way, especially near the lakes. These are not meant to mark territory, but to show reverence, each flag a whispered prayer, each cairn a plea for safe passage or healing. In recent years, a quiet movement has emerged among Tibetan scholars and ecological monks to protect Juoxiongla and its lakes from the creeping edge of tourism and commercial interest. There have been whispered proposals to turn the region into a nature preserve, not for the purpose of development, but to codify its sanctity and prevent roads, lodges, or extractive industries from sullying its waters. The mountain, they argue, is not just a place, it is a teacher. It shows what harmony can look like, what a landscape untouched by greed or conquest feels like in the soul. This sense of harmony is deeply reflected in the ecological balance that exists within Juoxiongla's footprint. The lower forests are home to red pandas, musk deer, and a range of birds found nowhere else on Earth. The higher slopes, while mostly barren of large fauna, host delicate communities of alpine plants, tiny, stubborn flowers that bloom briefly in impossible places, fed by snowmelt and sunlight. Insects adapted to the high UV exposure pollinate them, and the cycle continues year after year in quiet perfection. No single part of the ecosystem dominates. Each form of life exists in relation to the others, in a kind of living prayer that embodies the very essence of Tibetan cosmology. When evening comes to Juoxiongla, the colors begin to soften. The lakes turn from turquoise to violet, then to silver as the stars begin to appear, one by one, above the ridgeline. The glacier catch the last gold of the sun before falling into a deep, shimmering blue, and the wind falls away into a hush so total it feels like a vacuum. Some who have slept beside the lakes say they've dreamed of ancestors they've never known, or heard voices speaking in languages they cannot name. Others wake before dawn to light incense or bow toward the peak, humbled not by religion alone but by the overwhelming sensation that this mountain, this sacred, breathing mountain, is alive. Mount Juoxiongla does not ask to be famous. It does not compete for attention or declare its presence in obvious ways. It simply is, majestic, hidden, pure, a monument to stillness in a world that races, a guardian of water in a region that reveres purity, and a reminder that the most unreal places on Earth are often those where the human footprint has yet to settle. To reach it is to understand that some beauty is meant to be earned, not consumed. Some truths, like Juoxiongla itself, exist beyond the reach of maps, and can only be found by following not the trail underfoot, but the quiet pull of wonder in the heart. There are places in the world where time seems to slow, where silence is not an absence but a language, and where the very air feels older, wiser, as if it has held the breath of gods and beasts alike. One such place is Mount Bailey, Bailishan, nestled within the mysterious embrace of the Shenongjia forest area in western Hubei province. Draped in perpetual mist, woven with prime val woods, and laced with stories that bleed the line between reality and legend, Mount Bailey is not merely a geographic feature, it is a myth made moss-covered and living. Part of the Greater Darba mountain range, Bailishan is a high peak within the legendary Shenongjia National Nature Reserve, a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve famed for its deep biodiversity, endemic species, and spiritual folklore. While Shenongjia itself spans over 3,200 square kilometers, Mount Bailey rises like a silent sentinel within its western corridor, cloaked in forests so thick and wild that to step beneath their canopies is to feel swallowed by the very origin of life itself. At an elevation of around 2,300 meters, Bailishan is one of the higher peaks in the region, but it is not its height that defines its presence, it is its mood, its damp breath of fog, and the sensation of being watched by something older than memory. What makes Mount Bailey so surreal is the way it continuously transforms with light, weather, and silence. Mornings begin with sheets of mist that flow across the canopy like low-hanging ghosts. The air is cool, heavy with moisture, and often smells of cedar, moss, and wet earth. As sunlight filters through, shafts of golden light pierce the fog in dramatic columns, catching on spiderwebs, the trembling leaves of rare orchids, or the slow movement of a sambar deer crossing a narrow path. At noon, the forest sings, not with human noise, but with the chatter of birds, the hum of insects, the rustle of bamboo in the breeze, and sometimes, the howl of a macaque echoing across the valley. And then, by evening, the clouds descend again, and Bailey returns to its dream state, veiled, hushed, and mysterious. The biodiversity here is among the richest in East Asia. Mount Bailey, like its surrounding peaks, serves as a crucial microecosystem, with thousands of plant and animal species coexisting in a tightly interwoven web. It is part of the transitional zone between the subtropical and temperate climate belts, which makes it uniquely capable of sustaining both cold-resistant alpine flora and lush subtropical growth. You can walk from a temperate pine forest into a subtropical fern glade in less than an hour. Endemic species like the golden snub-nosed monkey, found only in central China, swing through the treetops, while giant salamanders, some over a meter long, lurk in shaded streams that cut through the underbrush. Black bears roam the deeper woods, and leopards, though rarely seen, still patrol the cliffs. There are also plants here that appear nowhere else. The endangered dove tree, Davidia involucrata, often called a ghost tree for the way its large white bracts flutter like spirits, grows freely in Bailey's Hollow's towering Chinese firs and ancient cypresses, some centuries old, rise like stone pillars lost in green. Underneath, the ground is carpeted in moss so thick and vivid that it glows in the dim light, absorbing footsteps and giving the forest a dreamlike quality, as if one is walking not through the real world, but through some ancestral memory of it. But Beilishan's surreal aura is not born from nature alone. It is steeped in centuries of legend and folklore, all bound to the wider mystique of the Shennongjia forest. The very name Shennongjia refers to the mythical Emperor Shennong, an ancient Chinese culture hero and father of agriculture, who is said to have roamed these mountains in search of medicinal herbs, tasting hundreds of plants and ultimately sacrificing himself so that future generations might benefit from his discoveries. Mount Bailey is believed to be one of the places where Shennong rested during his quest, and it is not uncommon for hikers to find crude stone altars tucked away beneath overhanging cliffs, where offerings of fruit, incense, or wildflowers have been placed, rituals of remembrance that predate written history. Then, of course, there is the mystery that has earned Shennongjia, and by association, Beilishan, a place in modern mythologies. The legendary wild man of China, known locally as Yeren. Said to be a towering, hair-covered humanoid creature akin to the Himalayan Yeti or the American Bigfoot, the Yeren has been the subject of hundreds of alleged sightings, many concentrated in the dense, secluded valleys around Mount Bailey. Local villagers speak of strange howls heard at dusk, footprints found in mud well over a foot in length, and even trees snapped at heights that no bear or human could reach. Scientific expeditions have come and gone, some with great fanfare, others in quiet secrecy, but the mystery remains unresolved. Whether real or imagined, the Yeren has become a symbol of the unknowable heart of Bailey, a living metaphor for the wildness that still resists domestication. Access to Mount Bailey is limited, and deliberately so. Though a few carefully constructed boardwalks and observation platforms exist in the broader Shennongjia Forest Reserve, Beilishan itself remains mostly trail-less, its interior traversed only by rangers, researchers, or the occasional pilgrim. In places, the only indicators of human presence are faint footpaths used by foraging villagers, animal tracks, or ancient stone steps swallowed by vines. There are no convenience stores, no lodges, just rustic cabins built by forest wardens, where one might stay the night and listen to the rain tapping on the wooden roof like a steady drumbeat of forgotten time. Monks and hermits once lived in these forests. Ruins of stone meditation huts still dot the cliffsides, barely distinguishable from the moss-covered boulders that surround them. Some Buddhist practitioners still venture into the area to perform biguan, a form of spiritual retreat in isolation, seeking not enlightenment in the noisy world, but the kind that emerges when one is finally alone with trees, wind, and silence. They believe that Mount Bailey, veiled in mist and forgotten by time, is a place where the veil between the seen and unseen grows thin. As the sun sets on Beilishan, the forest glows with an eerie twilight. The mist thickens, and the temperature drops sharply. Tree trunks become silhouettes, and the canopy fades into a charcoal ceiling. Fireflies appear in summer, flickering in patterns that resemble falling stars. Owls hoot from unseen perches, and somewhere in the distance, a stream sings its endless song, shaped by gravity and stone. In this moment, it becomes clear why so many legends arise here, not because people imagine too much, but because this land inspires a stillness in which imagination becomes real. Mount Bailey is not about adrenaline or achievement. It is not a summit to conquer, but a spirit to encounter. Its surreal quality comes not from flamboyance, but from the deep, quiet power of wildness that endures, not in defiance of civilization, but beyond its reach entirely. In Bailey, one feels the breath of the earth, slow, mossy, damp, eternal. One sees the world as it was, before walls and wires, before cities and speed. And perhaps that is the most unreal thing of all, not that such places exist, but that they still endure. In the mist-draped borderlands between Jiangxi and Hunan, where thick forests stretch like green oceans over serrated ridgelines and fog coils endlessly through every valley and pass, lies a mountain range that is not only a testament to the natural beauty of southern China, but also to its turbulent, determined past. This is Mount Jinggangshan, a name that echoes in Chinese history like the low toll of a sacred bell. But beyond the mythic chapters of revolution, behind the red banners and faded photographs, Mount Jinggang lives on as a real place, a hauntingly beautiful world of hidden waterfalls, moss-darkened cliffs, and ancient paths that still pulse with the footsteps of history. At first glance, Mount Jinggang appears like many of China's southern forested ranges. It is not the tallest of peaks. Its main summit, known as Huangyangji, rises to just over 1,770 meters. But height is a poor measure of significance here. What makes Jinggangshan so surreal, so enduring in the imagination of the nation, is how its natural attributes and human legacy intertwine until they are inseparable. It is a place where the land gave sanctuary to revolution, and where revolution, in turn, etched itself into the bones of the mountain. Geographically, Jinggangshan is a transitional zone, where the tail end of the Luoxiao Mountains meets the warmer, wetter lowlands of Jiangxi. This intersection of altitude and moisture creates an extraordinary blend of ecosystems. Thick subtropical forests cloak the slopes, layered with camphor trees, ginkgo, cedar, bamboo, and wild laurel. In spring, azaleas erupt in color across the ridgelines, turning whole mountainsides into living murals of pink and crimson. In summer, the air is heavy with the scent of fern and rain. In autumn, the leaves burn gold and orange against the ever-present backdrop of mist, and in winter, snow sometimes dusts the upper peaks, transforming them into dreamlike visions where past and present seem equally distant. The region's surreal, fog-laced appearance is one of its most haunting features. Even in midday, clouds drift low through the valleys, wrapping trees in diaphanous gauze. Sunlight arrives in shafts and fragments. The play of light and shadow, of half-revealed trails and stone terraces swallowed by vines, lends the place a timeless quality. One does not merely walk through Jinggangshan, one steps into it, as if entering the worn pages of an ancient book, or the last half-remembered dream before waking. Yet it is impossible to speak of Jinggangshan without invoking the revolution. In the late 1920s, as the Kuomintang Nationalist Party cracked down on communist movements in the cities, a young Mao Zedong, joined by military leader Zhu De, fled to the mountains to regroup. Jinggangshan, isolated, rugged, and remote, became the cradle of the Chinese Red Army and the seedbed of the Chinese Communist Revolution. It was here, in these forests and ravines, that guerrilla warfare took root. Here, the peasants' army found both protection and purpose, building a base that would eventually grow into the foundations of a movement that changed the course of world history. Today, the revolutionary past is carefully preserved in shrines, museums, and monuments scattered across the landscape. The Memorial Hall of the Jinggangshan Revolutionary Base stands at the foot of the mountain, housing relics, uniforms, maps, and photographs from that chaotic and defining era. Further up the slopes, visitors can find the ruins of Red Army camps, simple stone structures now moss-covered and half reclaimed by the forest. Old training grounds, command posts, and even trenches remain, silent witnesses to a time when these hills echoed with gunfire and ideologies. The famous Huangyangji outpost, perched on a narrow ridge with commanding views, was once the key defensive position during multiple assaults. Today, it is a place of solemn reflection. But these are not sterile museum pieces. Rather, they are integrated into the land, weathered by time, softened by moss and fog. The surreal nature of Jinggangshan lies in this blending. History does not stand apart from the forest, it seeps into it. Footpaths once used by revolutionaries are now walking trails lined with informational placards and prayer ribbons. In the early morning, as mists drift over the stone steps of an old Red Army hospital or cling to the wooden railings of a hillside cabin, it becomes easy to feel the weight of that past, not as dry recitation, but as lived experience etched into the very soil. Yet even stripped of its historical weight, Jinggangshan would remain unreal for its natural splendor alone. The sheer density of life here is staggering. In the forests and gullies around the mountain, more than 3,000 species of plants have been recorded, including rare medicinal herbs and ancient trees with gnarled, twisted trunks that resemble petrified fire. Wildlife, though elusive, includes the clouded leopard, muntjac deer, pangolins, and the crested serpent eagle, which rides the thermals above the tree canopy like a drifting shadow. At night, the forest sings with the sound of frogs, owls, and insects, and the stars, when visible through the shifting mist, feel almost close enough to touch. Water is also a defining element of Jinggangshan. Numerous waterfalls tumble from the heights, fed by mountain springs and summer rains. One of the most iconic is the Longtan waterfall, which plunges over a sheer cliff into a jade-colored pool surrounded by ferns and overhanging vines. Its sound echoes for miles, a continuous, rhythmic roar that mingles with birdsong and rustling leaves to create a soundtrack that is both primal and meditative. Small streams cross the forest trails, their waters clear and cold, often bridged by simple wooden planks or flat stones polished smooth by centuries of use. The spiritual resonance of the mountain is just as potent as its political one. Long before Mao's troops made their stand, Jinggangshan was a sacred site for Taoists and local spiritual practitioners. The peaks and caves were believed to be homes of mountain spirits, and the thick fog that often clings to the ridgelines was seen as a sign of divine presence. Even now, small shrines can be found deep in the woods, quiet stone alcoves with red candles, scattered coins, and the scent of burning incense. Monks still visit these secluded sites, as do villagers who have inherited rituals passed down over countless generations. Despite its reverence, the region has remained largely unspoiled. Conservation efforts have ensured that Jinggangshan's ecological systems remain intact. The government, while promoting its importance as a revolutionary site, has also recognized the mountain's natural beauty and cultural heritage. Development has been minimal, and most infrastructure blends subtly into the landscape. Visitors stay in eco-lodges or traditional guest houses in the surrounding villages, many of which still retain their Qing-era architecture: white walls, curved eaves, and stone courtyards filled with blooming camellias. Climbing Mount Jinggang is not a technical challenge, but it is an emotional and philosophical journey. As one ascends from the lowland forests into the cooler, higher altitudes, passing waterfalls, war relics, and hidden temples, a strange and powerful sensation takes hold. You begin to feel the density of layers here, not just sedimentary layers of stone, but layers of time, memory, and meaning. You feel the echo of 1,000 lives lived in hiding, in hope, in hardship. And you feel the land, vast and quiet, breathing it all in, holding it close, and never letting it go. Mount Jinggang is not a postcard or a monument. It is a living presence, a mountain of mist and memory, of resilience and rebirth. It is a place where revolution once hid in the folds of ferns and bamboo, where clouds carry stories, and where even silence speaks with conviction. It does not shout its significance, it whispers it in every stone, every stream, every step through the fog. To walk through Jinggangshan is to walk through history's shadow and nature's soul. It is to feel, if only for a moment, that the unreal is not something far away or magical, but something already here, woven into the moss beneath your feet, and breathing in the mountain mist all around you. Mount Anji, nestled in the heart of Zhejiang province, is not a single mountain in the traditional sense, but a poetic embodiment of the entire Anji region's verdant, breathing essence. It is a name that conjures images of towering bamboo forests swaying in unison beneath the winds of time, of emerald tea terraces curling up the hillsides like green waves, and of a landscape that speaks softly, like a Zen koan whispered into the soul. Anjishan is where nature doesn't just exist, it composes a quiet symphony of grace, rhythm, and deep ecological harmony. Located in northern Zhejiang and bordering Anhui province, Mount Anji rises from a terrain that is famously mountainous and richly forested. The peaks here are not jagged and imposing like those of the Himalayas or the karst spires of Guilin. Instead, they rise in smooth, rounded folds, often cloaked entirely in a singular botanical marvel, bamboo. This is the land of Anji by CHA, Anji white tea, and the Anji bamboo sea, both world-renowned not only for their economic value but for their sheer, surreal beauty. The climate of Mount Anji is a large part of what makes it so unique. It belongs to the subtropical monsoon zone, humid, misty, and temperate throughout the year. Spring here is a spectacle of regeneration. As the chill recedes, a wave of translucent green sweeps through the hillsides as fresh bamboo shoots pierce the soft earth. In summer, the bamboo forests become thick and cathedral-like, their long trunks reaching 20 meters or more into the air, forming a dense canopy that filters the sun into golden stripes of light and shadow. The air is filled with birdsong, the whir of cicadas, and the occasional soft rustle of leaves stirred by passing breezes, an ambient soundscape more meditative than any composed music. The bamboo itself is a miracle of engineering and symbolism. In Chinese culture, it represents resilience, integrity, and elegance, the plant that bends but does not break. In Anji, this symbolism is quite literal. The giant bamboos grow fast and strong, providing not only a habitat for wildlife but also essential raw material for the locals. Whole homes are built with it. Bridges, fences, baskets, musical instruments, chopsticks, all fashioned from a single, sustainable source that grows back swiftly and generously each season. One of the most unreal sights in all of Anjishan is the famed Jushi Bamboo Sea, a vast expanse of over 60,000 acres where bamboo grows uninterrupted in every direction, sweeping over hills and valleys in lush, endless waves. From a high vantage point, this sea of green appears to move, to breathe, to ripple in wind-blown rhythms like some mythic creature. Mist often rises from the lower hollows, curling around the boughs and lending the landscape a dreamlike, floating quality. At sunrise, when the light diffuses gently through the mist and strikes the bamboo trunks, the entire forest shimmers in shades of silver green, a moment of such quiet majesty that one cannot help but pause, breathe, and feel. Interwoven through this landscape are neatly terraced fields of Anji by CHA, or Anji white tea. Despite the name, it is technically a green tea, prized not for its strength but for its delicate, orchid-like fragrance and pale, almost translucent liquor. The tea is harvested in early spring, often by hand, with individual leaves plucked from tender buds before the sun is fully up. This tradition of careful, mindful tea harvesting is deeply rooted in the cultural identity of Anji. Small family-run farms to the hillsides, and generations of tea masters have passed down knowledge that goes far beyond agriculture. It is a way of life, a philosophy steeped in patience and observation. To visit these tea fields is to enter another rhythm of existence. Women in broad straw hats and long-sleeved jackets bend between rows of bushes, plucking with nimble fingers as birds call from nearby trees. Narrow stone paths snake through the terraces, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Tea houses made of bamboo and clay perch on ridgelines, their windows framing views of misted hills and meandering rivers. Here, a cup of tea is not a beverage, it is a meditation. The host will warm the pot with boiling water, swirl it gently, pour out the first infusion as an offering to the earth, then steep the second just long enough to draw out the spirit of the leaves. Sipping it, one tastes not just the plant, but the mountain, the morning, the moisture of the soil, and the silence in which it grew. Culturally, Anjishan is a place of deep roots and slow wisdom. It has long been a sanctuary for scholars, poets, and monks. Numerous temples lie hidden in its folds, small wooden structures with sloped eaves and red lanterns swaying in the wind. The Bamboo Temple, or Zhulin Sai, is one of the most famous. Surrounded entirely by dense groves, its courtyards are shaded, cool, and perpetually scented with incense. Here, monks tend to bonsai gardens, chant sutras that echo softly through the bamboo, and live by rhythms measured not in hours, but in breaths. And then there is the surreal quiet. Unlike tourist-heavy mountain parks in other parts of China, large portions of Anjishan remain untouched by crowds. One can walk for hours through shaded valleys and along clear streams without encountering another soul. You may stumble upon a moss-covered stone bridge arching over a crystal-clear stream, or find yourself in a natural bamboo amphitheater where even your footsteps seem too loud. In these moments, the line between nature and the sacred dissolves entirely. The fauna here are as fascinating as the flora. Mount Anji is one of the few regions where the critically endangered Chinese giant salamander can still be found in cold, fast-flowing mountain streams. The forests host golden pheasants, muntjacs, and occasionally the rare clouded leopard. But most famously, it is a stronghold for the giant panda's lesser-known cousin, the white panda of Anji, sometimes referred to as the white bear cat due to its rare leucistic coloring. Though sightings are exceedingly rare, the possibility of its presence adds an aura of myth and mystery to an already magical landscape. The unreal quality of Mount Anji is not flashy or dramatic. It's quiet, cumulative, immersive. It doesn't stun with icy cliffs or vertigo-inducing peaks. Instead, it whispers. It sways. It invites you to slow down, to breathe, to listen. It is a landscape made not of spectacle, but of subtlety. A place where every leaf, every ripple, every sip of tea is part of a greater, living stillness. As twilight falls over the bamboo forests, the temperature drops, the mist rises, and the trees seem to lean closer, as if drawing you into their silent council. Lanterns flicker on in distant homes, cicadas begin their nightly chorus, and the tea terraces vanish beneath a curtain of dusk. There is no drama here, no crescendo. Only the quiet rhythm of a mountain alive, aware, and generous with its peace. Mount Anji is a gentle unreal. A place where serenity isn't a goal, but a presence. It doesn't need to be climbed to be conquered, it only needs to be witnessed, with stillness in your heart and openness in your eyes. In its emerald silence, one may find not only beauty, but also the forgotten grace of simply being. Far to the west of China, where the ancient Silk Road once threaded between deserts and oases, where languages and empires have collided for millennia beneath the dome of an endless sky, there rises a breathtaking, quiet wonder known as the Tianshan Korajun grassland region. Set against the dramatic, snow-capped shoulders of the Tianshan Mountains in Xinjiang, this region is not defined by a singular summit or dramatic cliff face. Rather, its beauty unfolds in a vast and boundless dreamscape, rolling alpine meadows, glacier-fed rivers, distant peaks touched with snow even in the heat of summer, and a silence so complete it feels as if the earth has exhaled and forgotten to breathe in again. The Korajun grassland, also spelled Kalajun, is one of the most surreal and unreal places not only in Xinjiang, but on the entire planet, a place where nature has composed its own eternal hymn in green, gold, and white. Korajun in the Kazakh language translates to dark wilderness, and while the name hints at mystery, the region is anything but dark in spirit. During the warmer seasons, it bursts into color. Golden buttercups, violet irises, flame-red poppies, and delicate alpine wildflowers carpeting the land in an endless mosaic. Beneath this rolling carpet rise the jagged ice crowns of the eastern Tianshan Mountains, forming an awe-inspiring contrast, one of the most visually striking combinations of grassland serenity and alpine majesty to be found anywhere in the world. Geographically, the Korajun grassland spreads across the northeastern side of the Ili Kazakh Autonomous Prefecture, in the shadow of the eastern segment of the Tianshan Range. While the Tianshan Mountains themselves span thousands of kilometers, cutting a high, cold swath through Central Asia and China, Korajun sits nestled in a relatively protected basin. At altitudes ranging from 1,800 to over 3,000 meters above sea level, the grasslands undulate in smooth, painterly forms, the land sculpted by time, glacier, and seasonal winds. From above, the region looks almost too symmetrical, endless verdant waves stretching toward the horizon, broken only by ridgelines that seem drawn with an artist's brush. And then, there are the forests. One of the most incredible features of Korajun is the seamless transition from alpine meadow to thick coniferous woodland. Dark spruce forests blanket the lower valleys and mountain foothills, their spires creating natural cathedrals of shadow and sound. These woods harbor brown bears, snow leopards, wolves, and red deer, species that are often ghosts elsewhere but still roam freely here, undisturbed and wild. The call of an eagle or the crashing of a hidden stream may be the only interruption to the silence. But it is not just the topography that renders Korajun so extraordinary, it is the feeling of the place. There is something ancient in the air here, something ceremonial. The sky stretches with such clarity and depth that it gives the illusion of proximity. You feel as if you could walk into it. Clouds drift like slow ships over the peaks, casting vast shadows across the plains. The wind speaks constantly, yet softly, carrying the scent of grass and snow. And everything moves at the pace of eternity. This region has long been a homeland to Kazakh and other Turkic nomadic peoples who have grazed livestock here for generations. Their presence, though modest in scale, adds a layer of deep human continuity to the land. In summer, traditional yurts, round felt tents, begin to appear across the hills, temporary homes for herders moving with the seasonal rhythm of their animals. Horses, sheep, and yaks graze freely on the open meadows. In the evening, smoke curls up from small fires inside the yurts, and the distant sound of a dombra, a two-stringed lute, may float across the plateau. To witness this is to glimpse a way of life that has changed little for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. The Kazakh herders here live in intimate rhythm with the land. They know the weather by the shape of the clouds. They read the hills the way others read books. Their songs are born of the mountains. Their wisdom is shaped by wind, snow, and silence. There is no rush, no noise, no interruption. Time passes differently here, more slowly, more gently, more deliberately. It is no wonder that UNESCO designated the Tianshan Karajan grassland a World Natural Heritage Site in 2013, as part of the larger Xinjiang Tianshan region. The area represents not only a pristine ecological habitat but also a rare combination of alpine, subalpine, and forest ecosystems all harmoniously coexisting. Scientists and ecologists consider it a living museum of natural evolution. Rare plant species flourish in isolated pockets. Glacial rivers carve narrow ravines through highland meadows, and seasonal migration patterns still dictate the flow of both animals and people in a delicate, enduring dance. Among the most surreal features of Karajan is the so-called sky steppe, Chensai, a sweeping high-altitude plain located at over 2,500 meters, where the land feels as if it's floating between heaven and earth. Standing here, one is surrounded on all sides by towering white peaks, some of which remain unnamed, unmeasured, unspoiled, and fields that roll out in every direction like the surface of the sea. There are few places on Earth where scale feels so beautifully distorted, where the vastness is so complete that it strips you of identity and fills you with perspective. Wildlife is everywhere, though often seen from afar. Golden eagles soar overhead, using thermals to circle lazily over the grasslands in search of prey. Marmots poke their heads from burrows, chirping alarms at passing hikers. Argali, the massive wild sheep of Central Asia, graze cautiously on distant ridges, while wolves pad silently through shadowed gullies, always unseen, always watching. The lakes, glacial, still, and perfectly mirrored, act as watering holes for a host of species, and reflect the high mountain light in such vivid hues of turquoise and silver that they often seem illuminated from below. Tourism in the Karajan region remains modest compared to other more developed mountain parks in China. A few eco-lodges and traditional-style yurts accommodate those who make the effort to visit, but by and large, this is still a place untouched by mass infrastructure. Dirt roads wind through the valleys, and trails are often just paths worn into the ground by sheep hooves and human feet. Guides, often Kazakh locals, offer horseback treks into the highlands, taking travelers to places where mobile phones lose signal and the only sound is wind across the grass. At night, the transformation is otherworldly. With no light pollution, the stars explode into being above Karajan's vast emptiness. The Milky Way stretches in full brilliance from horizon to horizon. You can see constellations reflected in the black stillness of a highland lake, or watch as the pale glow of the moon casts the grasslands in shades of silver and grey. The occasional howl of a wolf, the soft jingle of a distant horse bell, or the crackle of firewood are the only sounds, each one magnified by the silence surrounding it. To sleep in Karajan is to sleep inside the breath of the earth. What makes the Tianshan Karajan grassland region so unreal is not that it is alien or extreme, but that it exists at all, a place of such quiet magnitude, such raw, untouched harmony, still preserved in a world that so often consumes and paves and forgets. It is a reminder of what Earth once looked like, and what it still can look like. It is a lesson in balance, in stillness, in humility. To visit Karajan is not to conquer it. It is to let it wash over you. To stand in a field of wildflowers while glacier gleam on the horizon. To watch a herd of horses move like flowing water beneath an infinite sky. To realize that some of the most unreal places are not the ones that scream for attention, but the ones that wait, in quiet majesty, to be truly seen. There are places on Earth where stone seems to defy gravity, where water falls not just as an element of nature but as a theatrical event, and where every peak, crack, an echo feels like part of a divine script etched in granite. Mount Yangdang, particularly its east peak, in Zhejiang province is one such place. A realm of towering cliffs, spindly rock formations, thundering waterfalls, and ancient spiritual stillness, it is often described as one of the most visually dramatic landscapes in all of eastern China. Yet no photograph or legend can fully prepare one for the overwhelming, vertical poetry of Yendang's surreal terrain. Mount Yangdang, Yandangshan, meaning Wild Goose Pond Mountain, is located in Yuqing County near the coastal city of Wenzhou. The name is drawn from a now vanished lake at the summit where wild geese once stopped to rest during migration. While the entire Yangdang range is large and contains several famous peaks, gorges, and rock formations, the east peak, Dongfeng, is its most iconic and cinematic segment. Here, nature has built a vast open-air temple out of stone and water, where every line carved by erosion and every fold of mist suggests a silent ritual far older than human memory. The East Peak's defining feature is its massive stone cliff face, a seemingly vertical wall of sheer, ochre-grey rock that towers over the forested valley below. It rises more than 200 meters in height, split by crevices and fissures that appear like ancient script scrawled across the surface by some forgotten deity. The cliff is so tall and narrow that it often creates its own weather, casting long, deep shadows in the morning, and reflecting a glowing red in the light of the setting sun. Rain trickles down its surface in thin veins. Moss and tiny plants cling to the tiniest nooks like green punctuation marks on a silent, monumental sentence. And then, there is the waterfall, Yangdang Waterfall, sometimes called the Great Dragon Falls. This spectacle is not merely a cascade of water. It is a performance of gravity and sound. The water drops from a narrow cleft near the top of the East Peak, plunging in a single uninterrupted stream for over 200 meters into a dark stone basin below. Depending on the season and rainfall, it can appear as a roaring column of white fury or a silver thread falling from the heavens. In summer, when monsoonal rains feed its upper reaches, the waterfall thunders with such force that the valley trembles. In winter, mist from the falling spray clings to the cliff and freezes, creating ice chandeliers and crystalline veils that catch the sun and scatter it into rainbows. The waterfall is one of the tallest in China and unquestionably one of the most mesmerizing. Visitors often stand in complete silence as it crashes down, their voices drowned out, their thoughts cleared by the sheer elemental power of water meeting rock. Rainbows often form in the spray at midday, and in the moonlight, the falls become spectral, almost glowing, creating an eerie luminescence that seems not of this earth. On especially humid nights, this glow, combined with the sound and mist, feels like standing at the edge of some celestial gateway. Flanking the waterfall are stone pillars and formations with names that sound like lines from a mythological poem. Lingfeng, Spirit Peak, Jiaoming, Illuminated Peak, and Guanyin Rock, said to resemble the serene profile of the Bodhisattva of compassion. These formations, many of them impossibly narrow and steep, rise like the spires of a ruined cathedral, their weather-worn faces painted with centuries of wind and rain. Some resemble human silhouettes, animals, or ancient deities. Local folklore attributes their creation to divine artisans who sculpted the mountains while the world was still young. Interwoven with this stark geological drama is a delicate thread of spiritual tradition. Yandangshan has long been a sanctuary for Daoist and Buddhist monks, hermits, and pilgrims seeking enlightenment through communion with nature. Hidden within the gorges and cliff bases are numerous temples, many of which date back over 1,000 years. The most famous is the Guanyin Cave Temple, built directly into the face of a cliff below the waterfall. Here, amid the roar of falling water, incense smoke curls around wooden beams, and monks in saffron robes chant ancient sutras that blend with the symphony of stone and water. These temples are not grand in size or ornate in decoration, but they possess a power that far exceeds their physical structure. Carved staircases lead up into their interiors. Lanterns sway in the wind above moss-covered altars. It is not uncommon to see a monk seated in stillness at the very edge of a precipice, meditating as clouds swirl below and swallows dart in the open air. The spiritual quietude here is not separate from the land, it is born of it. Beyond the cliffs and falls, the surrounding forests add another layer of surreal beauty. These are not dense, tangled jungles, but elegant woodlands of cypress, fir, and ancient ginkgo. Ferns, camellias, and rhododendrons grow along the trails, and in spring, wildflowers bloom in pockets of sunlight like offerings left by the mountain itself. In the early morning, Mist rises from the forest floor, curling around tree trunks and flowing upward toward the cliffs. Birdsong pierces the quiet. Water drips steadily from leaves, and far above, the waterfall continues its eternal descent. It's in these soft moments that Mount Yangdang reveals its gentler side, not the awe-inspiring verticality, but the intimate closeness of nature's breath. Fauna here are varied and protected. Though human settlements are nearby, the East Peak area remains a vital habitat. Red-bellied squirrels dart through the trees, while snakes and lizards bask on sun-warmed stones. Golden pheasants, with their brilliant plumage, can sometimes be seen flitting through the undergrowth. And overhead, birds of prey patrol the thermal currents rising from the cliffs. The region is a natural sanctuary, one that balances the raw grandeur of rock and waterfall with the soft details of life sustained. At night, the surrealism of Mount Yangdang reaches its pinnacle. The cliffs, now bathed in pale starlight, appear like frozen waves, sculpted in silver. The waterfall, no longer visible in full, becomes a voice in the dark, a continuous, resonant murmur echoing through the valleys. Fireflies emerge among the trees. The temples glow faintly with lamplight. In the distance, a gong sounds, marking the passage of time not by hours but by moments of reflection. For travelers who ascend the East Peak or spend the night in its shadow, the experience becomes more than a visual encounter, it becomes existential. The verticality of the cliffs forces you to look up, to consider scale, impermanence, and endurance. The waterfall reminds you of time's flow, of gravity's unending embrace. The forest paths draw your attention downward, inward, to the quiet beating of your own heart amidst the mountain's larger rhythm. Mount Yangdang is a surreal paradox, at once violent and serene, sharp and soft, ancient and ageless. It doesn't beg to be explored, it demands reverence. Here, nature has carved both spectacle and sanctuary, a cathedral not built by human hands but revealed through the patience of eons. It is a place where even silence has a voice, and where stone and water write poetry with every drop and crevice. To stand before the East Peak, to watch water leap from sky to stone, to breathe the incense of moss and mist, is to stand at the edge of something eternal, not merely a mountain, but a moment of the Earth's own dreaming made real. There is a place along the coast of northeastern China where the sea itself seems to part in reverence, revealing a secret path to a mountain rising like a calligrapher's brush from the waves. This is Mount Bijiashan, or Penholder Mountain, a small, surreal islet off the coast of Liaoning province, connected to the mainland by a natural stone causeway that only reveals itself at low tide. Named for its uncanny resemblance to the upright holder of a scholar's brush, Mount Bijia is not grand in size, but what it lacks in scale it more than makes up for in mystery, symbolism, and the dreamlike sensation of walking across the ocean to reach a mountaintop temple bathed in sky and salt air. Located in Jinju Bay, on the western fringe of the Bohai Sea, Mount Bijia is shaped like an elongated ridge, narrow and steep, its slopes rising abruptly from the sea to a spine of jagged stone peaks. From a distance, it appears to float on the water, much like Mont Saint-Michel in France or Enoshima in Japan. But unlike those well-known sites, Bijia remains lesser known outside of China, a quiet marvel tucked between land and tide, its sacred heart only accessible by timing and faith. The island owes its fame, and its otherworldly aura, to the Qianqiao, the so-called heavenly bridge that connects it to the mainland. This stone pathway lies submerged under the sea most of the day, hidden beneath the shallow tides of Jinju Bay. But when the tide recedes, the waters part to reveal a long, narrow causeway of rock and sand, about 1.3 kilometers in length, that snakes across the seabed like a passage in an ancient myth. For a few hours each day, pilgrims and travelers may walk this surreal marine road, the sea lapping at their sides, the wind whispering across tidal flats as seabirds cry overhead. To walk this path is not merely a journey of steps, but a passage between worlds, between land and water, between the mundane and the sacred. As one approaches the mountain, the steep ridges of Bijiashan rise suddenly and dramatically from the narrow strip of tidal stone. Jagged and reddish-brown, they resemble the worn edge of an enormous inkstone, the kind used for grinding ink sticks in traditional Chinese calligraphy. The shape is so specific, so suggestive of the tools of classical Chinese scholarship, that it seems less the product of erosion and more the work of divine craftsmanship. The entire mountain, in both shape and spirit, pays homage to the Chinese literati tradition, an ode in stone to poetry, thought, and reverence for the natural order. Climbing Mount Bijia is an immersive sensory experience. The path from the base leads through dense groves of pine and cypress, their needles exhaling the earthy perfume of resin and salt. The terrain is steep, sometimes requiring narrow staircases cut into the rock or winding trails that skirt sheer drops to the sea. Along the way, one passes small shrines nestled into cliffside alcoves, stone carvings etched with Daoist inscriptions, and panoramic viewpoints where the sea stretches in endless hues of blue and silver. On a clear day, the horizon blurs into the sky, and fishing boats below appear as white flecks tossed upon a silk painting. At the summit of Mount Bijia stands the Temple of Penholder Mountain, a complex of ancient halls and pagodas perched precariously atop the rocky ridge. The temple, believed to date back to the Tang dynasty and rebuilt in later centuries, honors a mix of deities and philosophies, embodying the traditional Chinese fusion of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucian ideals. One of its central halls is dedicated to Wenchang de Juan, the Taoist god of literature, often depicted holding a brush and scroll. Pilgrims climb the mountain not only for blessings, but for inspiration, for clarity, and to seek favor in academic and creative pursuits. This spiritual association with writing and scholarship runs deep. In imperial times, candidates traveling to take the civil service examinations would often visit Bijia Shan to pray for success. Even today, students and artists bring offerings, poems, and incense, hoping the mountain's sacred aura will grant them wisdom or unlock a deeper stream of thought. The symbolism is profound. From the brush-shaped peak to the inkstone-like ridge, Mount Bijia becomes more than a geological feature. It becomes a manifestation of intellectual yearning and cosmic harmony. Surrounding the temple complex, wind-battered pavilions cling to the cliffs, offering breathtaking views over the bay and the mainland beyond. Red prayer ribbons flutter in the wind, their knots tight with hope and devotion. When the tide is high, the sea surges at the base of the cliffs, and the mountain becomes an island once more, cut off, serene, untouched by the world's hurried noise. In these moments, the temple feels as if it's floating, untethered, timeless, and closer to the celestial realm than to the earthly. Nature, too, plays a vital role in the mountain's surreal presence. The surrounding waters teem with marine life, and during the ebb of the tide, starfish, sea cucumbers, and crabs can be seen scuttling across the exposed seabed. Seabirds wheel above, their cries echoing through the gullies. The salt wind carries a strange hush, punctuated only by the soft slapping of waves and the rhythmic creak of the old temple doors. There is no traffic, no roar of engines, only the cyclical music of tide and time. Local folklore weaves a rich tapestry around the mountain. One legend tells of an immortal who used the mountain as his writing desk, the causeway as his bridge to the mortal realm. Another tale speaks of a great scholar who died atop the mountain while composing a masterpiece of poetry, his final words etched into the cliffs by the gods themselves. Yet another story imagines that the mountain is a transformed brush left behind by a celestial calligrapher, the tides revealing the path to it only when the world is ready to read what he wrote. These stories are not mere superstition, they are echoes of how people have interpreted the mountain's uncanny form and behavior for centuries. And standing at the summit, watching the tide creep back over the causeway like an ink stroke being slowly redrawn, it's not hard to see why such myths persist. The sea moves like a scribe's hand. The wind hums like a whisper of verse. The mountain itself is the unfinished poem. Mount Bijia is not vast, not rugged, not remote in the traditional sense. But it is profoundly unreal. Its magic lies in transition, in its ability to appear and vanish with the tide, in its blend of elemental simplicity and spiritual depth. It is a place of arrivals and departures, of questions and silent answers. A mountain where the divine and the everyday meet between sea and sky, and where one can walk, literally, across the ocean to seek wisdom. To witness the tide parting, to feel the stone of the causeway beneath your feet, and to stand at the summit temple as clouds drift low and incense rises skyward, is to step into a living metaphor. In that moment, you are not just in a place. You are in a prayer, a poem, a vision that belongs to another time but welcomes you now. Mount Bijia waits in the tide, like a word waiting to be spoken, like a brush waiting to write its truth upon the sea. In the southern folds of Huen Province, where the mists cling to the hills like secrets and the air hums with the breath of ancient forests, there rises a mountain so elegant and enigmatic that its very name suggests serenity, Mount Lianhua, or Lotus Mountain. Named for its uncanny resemblance to a blooming lotus flower, This ethereal peak is one of the most spiritually charged and visually surreal landscapes in China. Shrouded in fog and wrapped in silence, Mount Lianhua doesn't declare itself in sharp ridges or violent ascents. It reveals itself gradually, like petals unfolding in a dream. Mount Lianhua lies quietly within the greater Luoxiao mountain range, its slopes caressed by dense woodlands, bamboo groves, and trickling streams that wind like silver threads through the valleys. It is not merely the topography that gives the mountain its name, it is the entire formation. From certain angles, especially when viewed from afar or from an aerial perspective, the ridges and peaks seem to curl and rise like the delicate petals of a lotus flower, radiating outward from a central heart. This organic, natural symmetry is strikingly poetic and has inspired generations of artists, monks, poets, and wanderers to climb its trails in search of meaning, clarity, or simply stillness. Unlike some of China's more popular peaks that are thronged with tourists and threaded with gondolas, Mount Lianhua remains relatively secluded. Its remoteness from major urban centers and its quiet demeanor make it something of a hidden gem, known mostly to locals and those who specifically seek its misty embrace. The approach begins subtly. There is no dramatic announcement of its grandeur. The mountain does not impose. Instead, it waits. You enter it as you would a temple, gently and with reverence. The lower reaches of the mountain are a lush tangle of bamboo, rhododendrons, wild tea shrubs, and thick undergrowth. The trails are narrow and intimate, dappled with golden light in the mornings and often cloaked in clouds by afternoon. The higher you climb, the more the mountain begins to feel like a living entity. Branches stretch like arms across the path. Old moss-covered stones seem to whisper forgotten tales. And always, the air thickens, not unpleasantly, but with a moist, fragrant vapor that smells of pine, soil, and something more intangible, the presence of time itself. One of the most surreal experiences of Mount Lianhua is the nearly constant veil of mist that embraces its upper elevations. This isn't the blanketing fog of fear or obscurity, it is an almost maternal kind of concealment, softening the world, erasing the horizon, and inviting introspection. Trees appear and vanish like spirits. Rock formations loom suddenly from the whiteness and then melt back into nothing. The mist doesn't hide the mountain, it reveals its soul. And when the sun begins to rise, everything changes. Mount Lianhua is perhaps most legendary for its sunrises. Those who have made the pre-dawn climb speak of it with a hushed awe, as if describing a personal vision. To witness dawn from its summit is to witness one of nature's most subtle miracles. The world begins in utter darkness, broken only by the sound of dew dripping from leaves and the occasional rustle of nocturnal creatures. Slowly, very slowly, a soft blush begins to rise in the east, first lavender, then peach, then a golden hue that lights the fog from within. The mist does not disappear, it glows. Then, at last, the sun crests the horizon, casting long shafts of light across the undulating hills, catching the dew on leaves, illuminating the faces of cliffs, and transforming the entire mountain into a luminous lotus suspended between heaven and earth. Peaks pierce the mist like islands in a sea of cloud. The silence breaks, not with noise, but with radiance. There is no cacophony here, only the quiet unfolding of the day. At the summit, a small pavilion stands, modest, wooden, its paint faded by decades of sun and rain. From here, the full glory of Mount Lianhua spreads out in all directions. When the weather is clear, the view stretches across layered ridgelines to the distant horizon. When it is cloudy, it feels as if you are floating, adrift on an ocean of vapor. Both states are equally beautiful. Both are equally real. Or unreal. Spirituality has long wrapped its tendrils around this mountain. Temples and hermitages, some ruined, some lovingly maintained, dot the mountainside. Many are inaccessible except by foot, tucked into alcoves in the cliffs or perched on isolated ridges. Monks and nuns still inhabit some of them, living in quiet devotion, cultivating silence like a crop. Pilgrims bring offerings not for miracles, but for peace. And it is peace, more than anything, that this mountain seems to bestow. Local legends speak of Mount Lianhua as a place of rebirth and revelation. One tale tells of a warrior who climbed the mountain seeking forgiveness for the blood he had spilled, only to emerge from the mist as a poet, never again lifting a sword. Another story claims that a lost monk once meditated for 10 years beneath a waterfall here, and when he opened his eyes, he could see into people's hearts. The stories are part of the mountain's mythos, but they are also metaphors. For here, transformation is not just possible, it is inevitable. The wildlife of Mount Lianhua is elusive, but its presence is keenly felt. Small mammals skitter through the undergrowth. Birds with vibrant plumage flash through the trees and vanish into the fog. Sometimes, a distant monkey's chatter echoes from the cliffs, reminding you that you are not alone in this sacred wilderness. The mountain is alive, not with noise, but with quiet attention. It sees you. It weighs nothing and everything at once. What makes Mount Lianhua truly unreal is not that it defies understanding, but that it deepens it. It's not a place of high drama or showmanship. There are no enormous statues or towering pagodas. It is a mountain of nuance, of texture, of soft presence. It invites you not to conquer it, but to dissolve into it. It is the embodiment of yin, quiet, yielding, inward turning, yet profoundly powerful. When the descent begins, the path feels different. What seemed daunting now feels familiar. The rocks, the trees, the mist, each element now feels like part of a silent dialogue you've been allowed to overhear. Back at the base, the sun now high, the world seems louder, faster, more angular. And yet, part of you remains behind, still walking those mist-shrouded trails, still standing at the lotus summit, watching the world awaken. Mount Lianhua doesn't boast. It doesn't clamor for attention. It waits, patiently, cloaked in fog, its petals always open, always silent. It is not a place to be seen once, but to be remembered again and again in the quiet corners of the mind. It is a dream made of stone and cloud, a prayer shaped like a flower, a stillness that moves. In the coastal province of Fujian, nestled between undulating tea fields, terraced farmlands, and hidden river valleys, rises a mountain little known to outsiders but steeped in the quiet reverence of time, Mount Yudo, or Yudashan. Unlike the exalted sacred mountains of China that attract floods of pilgrims and tourists alike, Mount Yudo whispers its beauty to those who seek solitude, introspection, and the slow, patient discovery of the sacred embedded in earth, forest, and stone. It is a realm where human footsteps are rare, and nature's hand is still the dominant artist, painting in moss, mist, and memory. Located in the heart of Fujian's inland hills, far from the noise of cities like Fuzhou or Xiamen, Mount Yudo is the sort of place that appears on old hand-drawn maps, written in delicate calligraphy, and known best to wandering monks, rural villagers, and scholars of the old way. The mountain's name, Yudo, literally translates to jade bean, a poetic title likely born from its rounded peak, which from a distance appears like a smooth green gem resting in a bowl of forest. This curvature, soft and unassuming, is deceptive, for though Mount Yudo is not towering in the dramatic Himalayan sense, it possesses an atmospheric depth and mystery that makes it feel infinitely higher than it is. As the ascent begins, one immediately senses that Yudo is not simply a physical place. It is a mood, a philosophy, a slow exhale in a world addicted to urgency. The lower slopes are lush and fragrant, blanketed in a living green that thrives year-round thanks to Fujian's subtropical climate. Here, groves of camphor and banyan trees intermingle with bamboo thickets and gnarled pine. Creepers and flowering vines twist around everything, even the stone steps carved centuries ago by monks whose names have long been forgotten but whose presence still lingers in every moss-covered slab. The mountain is perpetually moist. A veil of humidity clings to every surface, coating tree bark, slicking the leaves, and rising in visible plumes from the forest floor during early morning. In this verdant womb, sound behaves differently. Bird calls seem to echo longer. The rustle of an animal in the underbrush travels farther. And footsteps, your own included, seem unusually loud, as if breaking some centuries-old hush. The deeper one goes, the more the modern world peels away. There are no cable cars here. No convenience stalls, loudspeakers, or neon lights. Just earth and stone and trees, and the faint scent of incense, carried by the breeze. For hidden among the foliage are temples. Not grand palaces of gold and marble, but ancient, humble sanctuaries tucked into the land like secrets. Some are nestled beneath rock overhangs, others sit quietly on ridges, their eaves worn by rain and time. One such temple, perhaps the oldest on the mountain, is the Temple of the Hidden Light, so named because it receives only dappled sunlight through the dense canopy and because the wisdom practiced within was always meant to be subtle, inward, and private. Here, it is said, a line of reclusive monks once transcribed sacred texts by firelight and cultivated silence as their primary spiritual discipline. The temple still stands. Its wooden beams are dark with age, its tiled roof blanketed in moss, and its interior filled with the scent of sandalwood and damp stone. Inside, a single statue of Guanyin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, gazes down in eternal serenity. A stream murmurs beneath the temple floor, channeled through ancient stone troughs to purify the space. Pilgrims who find their way here often do so in silence, leaving behind prayer slips, small offerings of fruit or tea, or folded lotus leaves with wishes written inside. Climbing further, the trail narrows, threading through dense forest that sometimes closes in entirely, forming green tunnels of shadow and filtered light. Occasional clearings reveal glimpses of distant mountain ridges, the land below folding like an ocean of emerald waves. Wildflowers bloom here in seasonal bursts, violet bellflowers in spring, fiery red spider lilies in autumn, each petal glistening with dew or rain. Butterflies float through the air in lazy spirals. Cicadas buzz and fall silent in sudden unison. It is a place where time behaves not linearly, but circularly, where one moment can stretch like an hour, and a full day can vanish like a breath. And then, just before the summit, the forest parts. A lone granite tor stands above the trees, smoothed by centuries of wind. From its edge, one can gaze across a seemingly endless landscape of valleys, rivers, and distant peaks. In the early morning, thick mists roll in from the coast, wrapping the world in layers of gauzy white. Hills rise like islands in a cloud sea. The sun pierces the fog in golden spears, revealing the silhouettes of hawks soaring overhead and illuminating spiderwebs strung between branches like delicate tapestries. It is here, on this high ridge, that Mount Yudo's most elusive feature reveals itself, not a structure or a stone, but a feeling. A sensation of stillness so complete it fills the body. A slowing of the breath. A widening of the mind. Many describe it as a kind of spiritual saturation, like water soaking into dry ground after a drought. The mountain does not preach or shout. It listens. And in doing so, it teaches. Descending the opposite side of the mountain, one passes through a valley known locally as the Valley of Echoes. True to its name, this stretch of the trail, flanked by towering rock walls and overhung with bamboo, creates an acoustic phenomenon where even the faintest sound reverberates in waves. It is said that monks would use this valley for chanting, their voices bouncing off the stone in harmonic resonance, amplifying prayer into something physically tangible. Further down, a hidden waterfall emerges, thin, tall, and crystalline. Known as Jade Thread Falls, it slips down a sheer rock face into a natural stone basin that glows jade green from the minerals in the water. The pool, rarely disturbed by swimmers due to its sacred association, is often rimmed with fallen petals and overlooked by tiny shrines carved into the cliffs. It is one of the mountain's many subtle offerings, unannounced, unmarked, but unforgettable. Flora and fauna abound here in unassuming richness. Rare orchids cling to cliff faces. Ferns unfurl from crevices. Snub-nosed monkeys have been spotted in the deeper forests, and the elusive clouded leopard, once believed extinct in the region, has reportedly left tracks along the mountain's northern flank. The ecological quiet of Mount Yudo has allowed biodiversity to flourish in peace. It is not a sanctuary built by fences or patrols, but by remoteness and respect. As twilight descends on the mountain, everything seems to soften. The air cools, and the forest grows still. Lights flicker on at the few temples still inhabited, their orange glow barely visible through the thick green veil. Smoke from cooking fires curls upward, mixing with the scent of mountain herbs and wood. The stars, rarely visible in the cities of coastal Fujian, begin to emerge, one by one, above the canopy. And the mountain sleeps. Mount Yudo is not a spectacle, not a landmark clamoring for photographs or foot traffic. It is a mountain of intimacy, of quiet revelations, of walking meditation. It invites those who are weary of noise and speed to slow down, to listen not for thunder but for the murmur of leaves, not for grand visions but for inner clarity. Its temples do not promise miracles, they offer perspective. Its trails do not rush, they unfold. To visit Mount Yudo is to step back into the rhythm of the natural world, to remember that the sacred is not always grand or loud, it is often quiet, moist, green, and growing. It is in the root, the stone, the drip of water, the hush of trees. It is the mountain you didn't know you were looking for until it taught you how to find yourself. There are places in this world where reality seems to blur with myth, where the land itself seems touched not just by geology or weather, but by an ancient dream that lingers in every rock, breeze, and shadow. One such place lies deep in the Tibetan plateau of western Sichuan, within the Daocheng Yading Nature Reserve. Among its 3 towering holy peaks, each named and revered as a bodhisattva incarnate, none is more arresting, more solemn, or more otherworldly than Mount Shinari, the so-called sacred peak of Shambhala. Rising to an elevation of 6,032 meters, 19,790 feet, Mount Shinari is more than a mountain. It is a presence, a luminous white sentinel in the clouds. Its name translates to Mountain of the Sacred Feminine, and it is said to represent Avalokiteshvara, Guanyin in Chinese, the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion. From its glacial ridges and radiant slopes to the turquoise lakes that glint at its base, Shinari carries with it a spiritual charge so intense that many believe simply beholding it is an act of karmic purification. To arrive here is no small feat. One must journey far from the crowded plains of eastern China, through winding roads that climb into the thin, luminous air of the Hengduan Mountains. The final destination, Yading Village, sits at over 4,000 meters above sea level, a remote highland hamlet bordered by forests of golden larch and fir. From here, a trek begins into what has often been called the last pure land on earth, a phrase borrowed from Tibetan Buddhism and not used lightly. Mount Shinari reveals itself gradually, as if testing the sincerity of your approach. You enter through the Yading Valley, passing sacred rivers and prayer flag-draped bridges, through alpine forests that shimmer in autumn gold or glisten with spring frost. The air is thin and dry, electric with clarity. Blue magpies flit between branches. Yak graze in quiet meadows. And above it all, hidden at first behind sharp ridges, looms the snowy crown of Shinari. The moment it finally appears, gleaming white against a cobalt sky, its twin ridges flanking a sharp central peak like wings poised in flight, is one that silences thought. Unlike jagged alpine peaks that claw at the heavens, Shinari is smooth, sculpted, almost impossibly symmetrical. Its glaciers seem to glow from within, and when clouds drift across its face, they appear reverent rather than random, like veils fluttering before a throne. According to local lore, this mountain was not created like others. It was revealed, uncovered when the veils of illusion were lifted from the earth, exposing a pure fragment of the cosmic order. The Bon and Tibetan Buddhist traditions hold that Shinari and its 2 sister peaks, Yangmayong and Shanuo Duoji, form a spiritual trinity that protects the land and guides the souls of the faithful. Together, they are believed to be the earthly reflection of a celestial mandala, a divine diagram of harmony and transcendence. Circling the base of Shinari is a ritual path known as the Kora, a sacred pilgrimage route taken clockwise around the mountain. The full outer Kora is grueling, more than 30 kilometers long, climbing to over 4,700 meters in places. But pilgrims, many of them elderly Tibetans, walk it barefoot, spinning prayer wheels, chanting mantras, or even prostrating themselves every few steps in a profound display of devotion. It is said that one full Kora purifies a lifetime of sins. 13 bring enlightenment. And as you walk it, even in silence, even as an outsider, you begin to feel the slow change in your own perception. The physical landscape is raw and magnificent. Vertical cliffs streaked with ice, alpine meadows filled with blue poppies and edelweiss, glacial streams that sparkle like liquid quartz. But what is more powerful is the atmosphere, the unspoken hush that pervades everything. You feel watched, not by animals or people, but by the mountain itself. Not judged, just seen. At the foot of Shinari lies one of its most breathtaking features. Milk Lake, Nyonai High, and Five Color Lake, Wuse High, both glacial tarns so clear and vibrantly hued they seem painted rather than real. Milk Lake is a pristine shade of pale aqua, ringed by white silt and high tundra grass. Five Color Lake, meanwhile, shimmers with alternating layers of blue, green, gold, and violet, its hues shifting with the angle of the sun and the mood of the clouds. These lakes are considered sacred waters, and pilgrims often collect small bottles of their water to bring home, believing it brings blessings and healing. The stillness around these lakes is uncanny. No birds call. No insects buzz. The only sound is the faint whisper of wind across stone, as if even nature holds its breath in the presence of such sacredness. You sit at the edge of the water, heart pounding from altitude, hands cold from the glacier-fed air, and time ceases to matter. You are not a tourist here. You are not a traveler. You are a speck of being in the gaze of the eternal. Despite its remoteness, Mount Shanari has drawn increasing attention from photographers, mystics, environmentalists, and mountaineers, not for conquest, but for reverence. Climbing the peak is forbidden out of religious respect. It is a mountain to be circled, not summit. Even the most seasoned climbers speak of it with the kind of tone usually reserved for cathedrals or relics. And indeed, in a world where so many sacred places have become commercialized or diluted, Shanari remains intact, untouched in spirit, if not in footprint. The flora and fauna around the mountain reflect its rare and delicate ecosystem. Snow leopards roam the higher ridges, as do blue sheep and Tibetan marmots. Golden eagles soar overhead. In summer, the valleys explode with wildflowers that bloom in every imaginable color, painting the meadows like a living thanka. Yak trails cross the ridgelines. Prayer flags line the passes. Every rock feels like it remembers. And through all this, through the wind and cloud, through the chant of monks and the crunch of boots in snow, Mount Shanari stands motionless. Watching. Waiting. Offering nothing and everything at once. Those who return from Yading often speak not only of what they saw but of what they felt. An internal quiet, a recalibration, a deepening of perception that lingers long after departure. Mount Shanari does not impose enlightenment. It invites awareness. It does not demand belief. It inspires it. It is a mountain that makes you smaller, and in doing so, makes you whole. It is said in Tibetan tradition that Shambhala is not a place you can find on any map. It is a state of purity, clarity, and wisdom, hidden from the world but accessible through the heart. But perhaps, just perhaps, if you walk the Kora of Shanari, if you watch the dawn touch its summit, if you sit by the five-color lake and allow the silence to wash over you, you will understand. This mountain is Shambhala's edge, its threshold, its mirror, its whisper. Mount Shanari is not just a sacred peak. It is a revelation in stone and snow, a white lotus blooming in the sky, a passage to something higher than altitude can measure. Far in the remote reaches of Sichuan province, where the mighty Himalayas gradually give way to a tangle of ridges and forgotten forests, lies a mountain often overshadowed by its more famous neighbors, yet every bit as transcendent, Mount Luoji, or Luoji Shan. It is a place not of fame but of quiet magnificence, of steep ridges wrapped in silver mist, of hidden sapphire lakes guarded by craggy cliffs, and forests that explode into riotous color with the bloom of azaleas each spring. Unmapped in many minds and left off the itinerary of most travelers, Luoji Shan is one of Western China's last truly wild sacred spaces, a place that doesn't clamor for attention but earns all through stillness and elemental grace. Mount Luoji rises from the southwestern corner of Sichuan, near the border with Yunnan, within the Liangshan Yi Autonomous Prefecture. It's a land marked by rugged terrain, plunging valleys, and the deep cultural tapestry of the Yi people, who have called these highlands home for centuries. The mountain itself peaks at approximately 4,359 meters, 14,300 feet. Yet what gives Luoji Shan its character isn't just its height, it's its shape, its seclusion, and the symphony of ecosystems layered along its slopes. Unlike the icy, jagged summits of the inner Himalayas, Luoji's silhouette is softer, more organic, like the gentle arc of a sleeping animal or a protective arm curled around a secret. The upper ridges are studded with rocky towers, their faces streaked with mineral stains and weathered by centuries of rain and wind. Below them, the terrain undulates in a series of hanging valleys and alpine meadows that seem pulled from a mythic age, each bend revealing something utterly unreal. And then there are the lakes, dozens of them, perhaps more than 50, scattered across the mountain like forgotten tears of the sky. These aren't the vast, iconic glacial lakes of Tibet, but smaller, more intimate basins, most of them unnamed, hidden in craters or tucked behind ridgelines, and filled with water so clear it reflects not just the clouds but the feeling of the clouds. Some are deep and dark, like mirrors of obsidian. Others are translucent turquoise, fringed with reeds and snowmelt. A few are frozen nearly year-round, their surfaces broken only by the passage of wind or the footsteps of the occasional yak. To stumble upon one of these lakes is to step into a living haiku, brief, perfect, and impossible to replicate. Many of these alpine lakes are sacred to the local Yi people, who view Mount Luoji as not only a physical guardian but a spiritual one as well. Their oral traditions speak of the mountain as the body of a slumbering dragon, its head resting to the east, its tail curled into the western mist. The lakes, in this cosmology, are the dragon's dreams, glimpses into realms beyond the visible, fragments of spirit distilled into water. Offerings are sometimes left by the lake's edge, prayer flags, feathers, small stones stacked like cairns. No signs, no fences, no reminders of human dominion, just gestures of reverence, left for the mountain to accept or ignore as it chooses. One of the most visually and emotionally arresting features of Mount Luoji is its vast azalea forests. In late spring, usually from mid-April through June depending on elevation, the mountain becomes a garden of fire and snow. Hillsides explode in waves of color: crimson, coral, blush pink, deep lavender, and snow white. The azaleas grow wild and with abandon, tangled among the firs, spreading like living flame across the slopes. Some of these rhododendron trees are over 10 meters tall and centuries old, their branches twisted into impossible shapes by time and wind. The scent is subtle, floral with a hint of earth and cold air, and it lingers for miles. These wild azaleas aren't just beautiful, they are storied. In Yi tradition, the blooming of the azaleas marks the return of ancestral spirits from the high places. It's during this season that many Yi families trek into the mountain for ritual offerings, picnics of remembrance, and songs passed down through generations. To witness one of these informal mountain gatherings is to witness a culture in communion with its land. No pageantry, no spectacle, just quiet joy beneath ancient trees. Higher up, the forest gives way to rock and meadow. Marmots whistle warnings as hikers pass. Wild herbs grow in abundance, angelica, fritillaria, and ginseng among them, sought after by local healers and rarely seen elsewhere. The air becomes thinner, but also sharper, clearer, more alive. On certain days, especially after a storm, the sky is so lucid that it seems made of crystal. You can see for miles, the deep gorges to the south that run toward Yunnan, the broken teeth of remote peaks far to the west, and sometimes, if the sun is right, your own shadow cast enormous across a field of clouds. But Luoji's magic is not just visual. It's experimental. Unlike popular peaks with concrete paths and cable cars, Luoji demands a kind of humility. Its trails are often unmarked, winding through forests where phone signals vanish and maps mean little. Weather can change in minutes. One moment, you are bathed in golden light. The next, you are wrapped in fog so thick you can't see 10 feet ahead. And yet, within this unpredictability lies Luoji's quiet teaching: patience, adaptability, reverence. You don't conquer this mountain. You learn how to move with it. The wildlife here, like the mountain itself, is subtle but deeply present. Golden pheasants flash through the underbrush like coins tossed into shade. Snow partridges leave trails in the upper snows. Even clouded leopards have reportedly been spotted in the deepest woods, ghosts among ghosts. And in the quietest moments, especially at dawn or dusk, you might hear the low, haunting calls of Himalayan owls echoing between the ridges, as if the mountain itself were murmuring secrets in an ancient tongue. There is little infrastructure around Mount Luoji. A few local guest houses exist in nearby villages, run by Yi families who cook hearty meals of corn cakes, wild vegetables, and yak stew. These homes are often modest, but filled with warmth, laughter, and an unshakable connection to the land. Visitors who come with respect are treated not as tourists, but as temporary kin, welcomed, fed, and entrusted with stories not told to those who merely pass through. And perhaps that's the greatest truth of Mount Luoji. It is not a mountain to be consumed, photographed, and moved on from. It is a mountain that stays with you. It enters you through your feet, through your breath, through the aching in your legs and the quiet in your heart. It is not flashy. It is not famous. But it is utterly, absolutely unreal. For in a world of curated beauty and synthetic experiences, Mount Luoji remains wild, unfiltered, and ancient. It does not care for your agenda. It has no time for your performance. It simply is. And if you are quiet enough, still enough, brave enough to walk its trails without needing to understand everything, you might find, as others have, that the mountain teaches you things you didn't know you needed to learn. Mount Luoji is a mirror, not of ego, but of essence. It reflects not what you bring, but what you become. There is a certain kind of mountain that doesn't roar with grandeur or blind with snow, but instead whispers through leaves and mist, weaving itself into the rhythm of daily life. Mount Wuliang, or Wuliangshan, in Yunnan province, is just such a place. It is not only a mountain, it is a culture, a scent, a flavor, a horizon that breathes. Known as one of China's great tea mountains and home to some of the most enchanting and storied landscapes in the country, Wuliangshan is at once a geographical formation and a living, growing, aromatic world unto itself. Stretching along the Mekong River Valley near the border of Dali and Pu'er prefectures, Wuliangshan's ridgeline forms a dramatic backbone of southeastern Yunnan, rising to elevations of over 3,300 meters. Its name, Wuliang, meaning boundless or immeasurable, is a fitting title for a landscape that seems to go on forever, with its ridges folding into each other like waves frozen in time, its forests sinking into shadowy depths and re-emerging in crests of green and gold. Yet this boundlessness is not empty or overwhelming, it is generous. It gives shade, moisture, bounty, and silence in perfect balance. The approach to Wuliangshan is steeped in a shifting palette of elevation and temperature. At lower altitudes, warm breezes drift up from the Lancang River, carrying the scent of wild camellia and loamy soil. Subtropical forests press thick against the hillsides, home to golden bamboo, ancient banyans, and the vivid reds and oranges of rhododendrons in spring. Small villages with tiled rooftops and low stone walls nestle into natural terraces. You begin to notice something curious. On nearly every ridge and hillside, the trees are not wild. They are tea. This is one of the oldest cultivated tea regions in the world. Wuliangshan is not just a scenic mountain, it is a sacred site in the ancient world of tea. Here, some of the oldest tea trees on the planet still grow, their twisted trunks and leathery leaves living witnesses to dynasties, revolutions, and millennia of human ritual. The Dai, Yi, and Han peoples who inhabit this region have been harvesting and crafting tea here for centuries, developing a symbiotic relationship with the land that borders on the spiritual. The most famous product of Wuliangshan is Pu'er tea, a fermented dark tea known for its earthy aroma, deep umami flavor, and medicinal qualities. But to speak of it only as a commodity misses the heart of what makes this region unreal. In Wuliangshan, tea is not simply picked, it is tended like a sacred rite. Farmers rise with the fog to scale the ridgelines and pluck only the tenderest buds from trees that may be hundreds of years old. The air during harvest season is filled with the rustle of baskets and the soft chant of elders passing down methods that were never written, only remembered. Much of the region remains blanketed in clouds year-round. Moist air rising from the river valleys condenses over the ridges, creating an almost constant ebb and flow of fog that gives Wuliangshan its ethereal quality. This mist isn't just beautiful, it plays a vital role in the flavor of the tea, cooling the leaves, extending their growing season, and concentrating their essential oils. But beyond agriculture, the clouds add something less tangible, a dreamlike softness to everything they touch. Walking along a path on a Wuliangshan morning can feel like wandering through a dream you only half remember. Trees appear and vanish. Voices echo strangely. The ground is damp and yielding. And the sky remains close, veiled in pearl-colored breath. Climbing higher, the tea plantations give way to pine forests, where the air thins and cools, and the forest floor is a patchwork of moss, mushrooms, and fallen needles. Birds flit between high branches, sunbirds, cuckoos, and the occasional golden pheasant. On clear days, you can see as far as the snow-capped peaks of the Galagong Range. But it is rare for the sky to stay clear for long. Even in summer, clouds creep back quickly, sometimes descending so thickly that you feel suspended in a sea of white. Villages perched on the slopes of Wuliangshan are as much a part of the mountain story as its rocks or trees. In these communities, many of them Yi or Dai minority groups, homes are built from timber and clay, sometimes stacked against the slope like a staircase, with rice paddies or tea terraces unfurling below. Life here follows an ancient rhythm. Meals are cooked on open hearths. Elders sit weaving bamboo baskets or stringing chilies to dry. Children run barefoot between tea bushes. And during harvest festivals, the mountain comes alive with song, dance, and offerings of food and incense to the spirits of earth and forest. There is a deep reverence here for the mountain itself, not just as a provider, but as a guardian. Shrines to mountain gods or ancestral spirits are tucked into the edges of paths or hidden in clearings beneath ancient trees. Offerings of rice, tea leaves, and incense sticks are made to these spirits, asking for good weather, protection from landslides, and blessings for the harvest. This sense of sacred geography permeates everything. The land is not owned, It is respected, honored, and passed through. Perhaps one of the most extraordinary and little-known features of Wuliangshan is its system of ancient trails, some of which date back to the early tea horse trade routes of the Tang and Song dynasties. These paths wind through dense forests and connect remote mountain hamlets, often following the contours of the ridgelines. Some are paved in old stone, their surfaces smoothed by centuries of foot traffic from traders, monks, and pilgrims who carried tea, salt, silk, and stories across the spine of China. To hike along these trails is to step back in time. You pass crumbling watchtowers, stone tea drying platforms, and forgotten waymarkers inscribed with Buddhist symbols. In places, wild orchids grow from cracks in the stone. In others, you pass through clearings that open onto dramatic cliffs overlooking valleys hundreds of meters deep, where clouds swirl like milk in a bowl. The wind sings through bamboo groves. Sometimes you see no other soul for hours. And yet, you never feel alone. Wuliangshan possesses that rare, mystical quality of presence, a sense that the mountain is aware of your passage, that it is watching but not judging. The Yi believe that every mountain has a soul, and Wuliangshan's soul is that of a quiet elder, patient, knowing, rooted. It does not speak in loud gestures, but in wind and light and the rustle of tea leaves brushed by morning dew. At night, when the fires burn low and the mountain is wrapped in velvet darkness, the stars shine with impossible clarity above the ridges. You hear crickets, distant water, and sometimes, just sometimes, the rhythmic beating of a drum from a village hidden across the slope, echoing like a pulse through the mountain's sleeping heart. Wuliangshan is a place of harmony, not of stillness, but of movement in balance. Mist and sun, forest and terrace, tradition and change. It does not need to be tamed. It needs only to be entered with respect, with humility, and with the willingness to be changed. For once you walk among its tea trees, once you drink its cloud-fed water, once you sit on a stone path carved by the feet of forgotten travelers, you carry the mountain with you, not in photographs or souvenirs, but in the rhythm of your breath, in the depth of your silence. Mount Wuliang is not just an unreal place, it is a living wisdom. A steep, fragrant poem written in fog and leaf and root. In the deep southern flanks of Yunnan, where the land begins to blur into the rain-drenched highlands of Southeast Asia, the Ailao Mountains rise like an ancient, breathing body, massive, quiet, and cloaked in 1,000 shades of green. Among its many folds and ridgelines, the western edge of the Ailao Range remains one of the most untouched, uncelebrated, and utterly astonishing corners of China, the Mount Ailao West Ridge. Stretching through tropical and subtropical latitudes with no interest in human schedules or boundaries, this remote spine of wilderness is not just a mountain, it is an ecological ark, a cultural refuge, and a living relic of a world before roads, fences, and maps. To understand the power of the Ailao West Ridge, one must first understand its remoteness. It is not a mountain you stumble upon or photograph from a highway lookout. It lies tucked away from main transportation routes, guarded by dense rainforest and a complex web of ravines and ridgelines. The region sits within the Ailao Mountain Nature Reserve, a national-level protection zone, but even that administrative label feels distant from what the mountain actually is, an ungoverned kingdom of cloud forest, canopy, and constant life. It is the kind of place where mist doesn't just rise, it breathes, drifting through branches like spirits revisiting their realm. At elevations ranging from 2,000 to nearly 3,200 meters, the western ridge of Ailao traverses a massive climatic gradient. The lower reaches are wrapped in steamy, subtropical jungle, thick with broadleaf evergreens, giant ferns, and liana vines that twist like serpents across the forest floor. Orchids bloom in impossible places. Water drips constantly, from leaves, from moss, from the air itself. The deeper you walk into these jungles, the more sound becomes both overwhelming and eerily precise. Cicadas shrieking like electrical wires, monkeys howling from hidden ridges, birds calling in a dialect only the mountain understands. Then, slowly, the terrain shifts. As you ascend along the western ridge, the tropical forest gives way to subtropical oak-pine transition zones, and eventually to temperate highland cloud forest, an ecosystem so rare, so precious, that only a handful of such zones exist across the entire world. Here, the trees are hung with moss and epiphytes, the ground is carpeted in fallen needles and wild ginger, and the sky above is often invisible behind a thick, soft quilt of fog. This cloud forest is a biodiversity hotspot of global importance. Mount Ailau West Ridge shelters over 2,500 species of plants, including countless medicinal herbs, ancient ferns, and rare trees found nowhere else on Earth. The fauna is no less spectacular. The endangered black-crested gibbon, a species so elusive it's often called a ghost, clouded leopards, Asiatic black bears, and an astounding variety of birds, including vivid hornbills, dazzling sunbirds, and laughing thrushes that echo like flutes through the trees. What makes this place feel truly unreal, however, is not just its biological richness, but the way it still pulses with ancestral rhythm. For while the ridge is remote, it is not abandoned. Scattered throughout its foothills and slopes are small villages inhabited by Yunnan's many minority ethnic groups, most notably the Hani, Yi, Lahu, and Dai peoples. These communities have lived in intimate symbiosis with the mountain for centuries, not only surviving its ruggedness, but honoring its power. The Hani people, in particular, have long held the Ailau range as sacred. They refer to the mountain as the backbone of the sky and believe it is inhabited by ancestral spirits who control the balance between rain, growth, and health. Their agricultural systems are a miracle of human environmental harmony. Intricate terraced rice fields that cascade down steep slopes like liquid mirrors, fed by forest springs and maintained through communal labor and ritual. Every stage of cultivation, from planting to harvest, is accompanied by song, prayer, and offerings to the mountain. And high above their homes, often hidden from view by trees and mist, are sacred forest groves that are never cut, never hunted in, and never entered lightly. These spaces are considered the dwelling places of nature spirits, guardian entities that maintain the equilibrium between the people and the land. Trespassing here without purpose or purity of heart is believed to invite illness, misfortune, or even death. The forest, in this worldview, is not a resource. It is a relative. Trekking the western ridges is no easy feat. The trails are often narrow, slippery, and unmarked, winding through thick jungle that often feels impenetrable. Landslides are common during the rainy season. Leeches cling to boots and ankles. Yet for those who persevere, the rewards are immense. Waterfalls that appear out of nowhere. Ancient trees with trunks like cathedral pillars. Wild monkeys watching you from branches above. Entire slopes blanketed in blooming rhododendrons or wild magnolias. And always, the mist, curling through bamboo thickets, softening the harsh edges of stone, rising like breath from the soul of the mountain itself. During the dry season, some parts of the ridge open up under clearer skies, revealing expansive views over the Lancang River basin. The ridgeline itself twists and curls like a dragon's spine, covered in a mosaic of dark green jungle, lighter green bamboo, and patches of exposed rock where cliffs drop suddenly into hidden valleys. In the distance, other peaks of Yunnan rise and fall like waves caught in mid-motion. But here on Ailau's western edge, it feels as though you're standing on the threshold between two worlds, the seen and the hidden, the cultivated and the wild, the known and the ineffable. The air carries not just the scent of rain and leaves, but the feeling of memory. This is land that remembers. Every bird call feels like a voice from a story you've half forgotten. Every rustle in the leaves suggests the presence of something watching, not threatening, but aware. Here, the mountain is not a thing you climb or conquer. It is a living world you enter into, gently, respectfully, temporarily. Few visitors ever come here, and even fewer stay long. There are no tourist facilities, no maps, no comfort zones. Just the endless hum of life, the pulse of insects and roots, the call of birds and the crackle of underbrush. And yet, for those willing to walk slowly, to listen, to follow the trails used by generations of Hani and Yi elders, there are glimpses, brief, soul-deep glimpses, of something profound. A way of living where nature is not an enemy to be subdued, but a sacred partner. A place where mist isn't just weather, it's the breath of the ancestors. In an age obsessed with visibility and access, Mount Ailau West Ridge remains defiantly hidden. It does not exist to be consumed. It exists to be respected, preserved, and, if you are lucky, momentarily witnessed. Its unreal nature is not in its spectacle, but in its survival. It is a living sanctuary of balance, biodiversity, and belief. To walk its paths is to walk backward through time. To stand in its forests is to feel your own heartbeat fall into rhythm with the roots beneath your feet. And to leave it, finally, is to understand that some of the most wondrous places on earth are those that do not call out to you at all, because they are still busy whispering to the clouds. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.